Hello guys, welcome to Ben 10 What If. So in this video, we will see what if Ben 10 turned evil. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1, Corruption, Seriously. Ben Tennyson grumbled, flicking alien goo off his jacket sleeve. This is the third time this week I've had to save everyone, and I still can't get a break on my physics homework. The sun blazed overhead as Ben trudged through what remained of Bellwood's downtown plaza. Smoking craters pockmarked the concrete where, just 30 minutes earlier, a squad of incursion shock troops had attempted to establish a beachhead for invasion. Now, the only evidence of their presence was the purple slime splattered across storefronts and the faint smell of ozone that always followed Ben's transformations. At 18, Benjamin Tennyson had spent over a third of his life as the wielder of the Omnitrix, the most powerful device in the universe. His summer vacation at 10 years old had transformed him from an ordinary kid into a superhero with access to the genetic code of thousands of alien species. 8 years later, he'd saved the universe more times than he could count. And he was exhausted. Mr. Tennyson. A reporter shoved a microphone in his face, cameraman trailing behind her. Channel 5 News. Can you comment on the property damage caused during today's battle? Early estimates put it at over $3 million. Ben stopped walking. Property damage? Are you kidding me right now? I just stopped an alien invasion. Again. The reporter pressed forward. Some city officials are questioning whether your methods, my methods. Ben cut her off, feeling heat rising to his face. You know what would have happened if I hadn't transformed into way big and stomped those guys? They would have set up a phase disruptor cannon right where you're standing and turned half the state into a smoking crater. The camera's red light blinked accusingly. Ben knew how this would play on tonight's news. They'd edit out the context, make him look like he was throwing a tantrum. They always did. Look, he sighed, running a hand through his brown hair, I've got finals tomorrow. Can we do this another time? Without waiting for an answer, he activated the Omnitrix, the alien watch-like device that had been grafted to his wrist for 8 years. The familiar green interface glowed as he cycled through alien forms before slamming down on the selection. XLR-8, he called out as his human form dissolved into that of a blue and black velociraptor-like alien with wheels for feet and a streamlined helmet. In a blur of motion, he vanished, leaving the reporter standing in a swirl of dust. Cutting it kinda close today, weren't you? Gwen Tennyson asked, not looking up from her laptop as Ben skidded into their shared study space at the Bellwood Public Library. Ben transformed back to human in a flash of green light, dropping into the chair across from his cousin. Not my fault. Incursions decided today was the perfect day to try taking over Earth again. The Incursions? Gwen finally looked up, her red hair pulled back in a ponytail, green eyes narrowed. I thought they were still rebuilding after what happened on Incursi Prime. Apparently not, Ben said, pulling his physics textbook from his backpack. They had some new tech, too. Phased right through my initial Diamond Head form. Kevin Levin, Gwen's boyfriend and Ben's longtime friend, slid into the seat beside them, placing 3 coffee cups on the table. Brought caffeine. Figured you'd need it after saving the world again, Tennyson. Thanks, Ben muttered, grabbing the largest cup. At least someone appreciates what I do. Kevin raised an eyebrow. Rough day. Channel 5 ambushed me about property damage. Like I had a choice. Ben took a long sip of coffee, letting the bitterness match his mood. Sometimes I wonder why I even bother. Because you're a hero, Gwen said. Matter-of-factly, taking her own cup. It's what you do. Ben stared at his physics notes without really seeing them. Yeah, well, being a hero doesn't exempt me from Professor Fleming's final tomorrow. Or from rent. Or from anything else normal people deal with. Nothing about our lives has ever been normal, Kevin reminded him, his dark eyes scanning the library. Old habits from his criminal days never quite died. But hey, at least we've got each other's backs. Ben nodded absently. That was true enough. After all they'd been through, hybrid invasions, Dagon's return, the Incursion Empire's previous attempts, the three of them had formed a bond stronger than family. But lately, it felt like even that wasn't enough. I think I'm burning out, Ben admitted quietly. 8 years of this. Every time we stop one threat, something bigger shows up. Gwen reached across the table, touching his hand. We can handle it together, Ben. We always have. That's just it, Ben said, pulling his hand away to gesture at the Omnitrix. It's always on me. The Omnitrix chose me. The fate of everything always comes down to whether Ben Tennyson can pull off another miracle. And you always do, Kevin shrugged. That's the gig. But for how long? Ben asked. What happens when I mess up? When I'm not fast enough or smart enough? When I pick the wrong alien? An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. They'd all thought it, but Ben rarely voiced these doubts. Maybe we should call Grandpa Max, Gwen suggested. The plumbers could increase their presence on Earth, give you some backup. They're already stretched thin, Ben reminded her. After what happened in the Andromeda Galaxy last month, half the force is dealing with the cleanup. Kevin leaned forward. Look, Tennyson, if you need a break, I don't get breaks. Ben snapped, louder than he intended. A few nearby students glanced over with annoyed expressions. He lowered his voice. Sorry. I need to pass this physics final. One normal thing. Is that too much to ask? They studied in silence after that, but Ben couldn't focus. The equations blurred before his eyes, replaced by images of battles fought and enemies defeated. The weight of the Omnitrix seemed heavier than usual against his wrist. The physics final came and went. Ben barely passed, a miracle considering he'd been called away halfway through to deal with a Tekadon robot rampaging through the financial district. He'd missed graduation ceremony rehearsal entirely. That night, he sprawled on his apartment couch, too tired to even reach for the TV remote. His phone buzzed with a message from Rook Blanco, his plumber partner. Magister Tennyson requests your presence at Plumber HQ, Priority Alpha. Ben groaned, pushing himself upright. Priority Alpha meant no excuses. He activated the Omnitrix, transforming into Jet Ray, a red, manta ray-like alien capable of supersonic flight, and shot through his window into the night sky. Plumber headquarters, disguised as a simple plumbing supply store, stood on the outskirts of Bellwood. Ben reverted to human form as he landed and pressed his hand against the scanner hidden in the brick wall. The facade shimmered, revealing the true entrance to Earth's branch of the Intergalactic Peacekeeping Force. Ben, his grandfather called as he entered the command center. Max Tennyson stood by the central holographic display, his weathered face grave beneath his shock of white hair. Despite being well into his 60s, the veteran plumber still commanded respect throughout the galaxy. "What's up, Grandpa?" Ben asked, noticing the tension in the room. Various alien plumbers moved with unusual urgency, and multiple emergency signals flashed on the displays. "We've got a situation," Max said, gesturing to the star map hovering above the table. "A Chronosapien temporal wave has been detected heading for Earth's sector." Ben felt his stomach drop. Chronosapiens were a species capable of manipulating time itself. Their temporal waves could rewrite reality. "Maltruant?" he asked. Naming the rogue Chronosapien he'd faced before. "Unknown," Max replied. "But the wave signature is different, more concentrated. Whatever's generating it has a specific target in mind." Rook stepped forward, his feline features set in a serious expression. "According to our calculations, the wave will reach Earth in approximately 6 hours. Once it hits, it could potentially erase our timeline completely." "So, just another Tuesday," Ben said with forced levity. "What's the plan?" Max pulled up additional data. We're sending you to the source. Azimuth has provided coordinates for a pocket dimension where the wave originates. You'll need to shut it down at the point of origin. Shouldn't we evacuate? Ben asked. Get as many people off planet as possible. Max's expression darkened. There's nowhere to evacuate to, Ben. This wave is designed to follow Earth's chronological signature. Anywhere our people go, it would eventually find them. The weight of responsibility settled even heavier on Ben's shoulders. Got it. Solo mission, then. I will accompany you, Rook offered. Ben shook his head. No offense, partner, but if this goes sideways, we need someone with your skills coordinating defense here. Besides, he tapped the Omnitrix, I've got all the backup I need. Max nodded reluctantly. Azimuth said the same thing. He's prepping a dimensional transporter to send you directly to the source. It'll be ready in 30 minutes. Then I'd better gear up, Ben said, already calculating which aliens might be most effective against time manipulation. Clockwork was the obvious choice, but if combat was involved, he'd need other options. Ben, Max said, stopping him with a hand on his shoulder. This is different. The readings are unlike anything we've seen before. Promise me you'll be careful. Ben forced a smile. When am I not careful? The look Max gave him spoke volumes. The dimensional transporter hummed with energy, creating a swirling vortex that pulsed with blue-white light. Ben stood before it, mentally reviewing the mission parameters one last time. Remember, Azimuth's voice crackled through the communicator, the pocket dimension exists outside normal spacetime. Your Omnitrix may behave, unpredictably. Great, Ben muttered. Any other good news? Just one piece of advice, the Galvan creator of the Omnitrix said. Trust your instincts, not the technology. Even my greatest creation has its limitations. Now you tell me, Ben sighed. 8 years and you're still dropping user warnings. The universe is full of surprises, Ben Tennyson, Azimuth replied cryptically. Even for me. Before Ben could respond, the transporter activated fully, engulfing him in light. He felt the familiar disorientation of dimensional travel, the stretching sensation, the momentary weightlessness, the rush of alien sensations. When the light faded, he found himself standing on what appeared to be a floating island of rock suspended in a void of swirling colors. The sky, if it could be called that, pulsed with temporal energy, rivers of light flowing in impossible patterns. Okay, weird even by my standards, Ben muttered, scanning his surroundings. In the center of the floating island stood a massive structure that resembled a clock tower, but constructed of materials that seemed to shift and change as he looked at them. Energy poured from its peak, coalescing into what must be the temporal wave Max had detected. Ben activated the Omnitrix, cycling through his aliens until he found Clockwork, the Chronosapien form that might give him some advantage in this time-warped environment. He slammed down the dial. Nothing happened. What the? He tried again, with the same result. The Omnitrix's interface remained green, but it wouldn't activate a transformation. Azimuth wasn't kidding about unpredictability, Ben grumbled, starting toward the tower on foot. Guess we're doing this the old-fashioned way. As he approached the structure, the air grew thick with temporal energy. Each step felt like moving through molasses. The tower itself seemed to resist his approach, reality warping around it in defensive patterns. Hey! Ben called out, unsure if anyone could hear him. Whoever's messing with time, how about we talk this out? I've got finals week, and reality-ending threats are really cramping my study schedule. A sound like breaking glass echoed across the void, and a figure stepped out from the tower's entrance. Ben tensed, ready for combat despite his non-functioning Omnitrix. The figure that approached wasn't what he expected. It wasn't Maltruant or any Chronosapien he recognized. Instead, it appeared humanoid, wrapped in shifting bandages that occasionally revealed glimpses of stars and cosmic energy beneath. Benjamin Tennyson, the figure spoke, its voice echoing with multiple tones. The wielder. You are, expected. Yeah. Well, your time wave wasn't on my calendar, Ben retorted, edging closer. Want to explain why you're trying to erase my planet's timeline? The bandaged figure tilted its head. Erasure implies destruction. This is, correction. Not from where I'm standing, Ben countered. Look, I don't know who you are, but messing with time never ends well. Trust me, I've been down this road before. You have traveled time's pathways, yes, the figure acknowledged. But always as a visitor. We are its caretakers. The Chronarchs. Chronarchs? Ben had never heard the term, not even from Professor Paradox, the time-traveling immortal who occasionally guided him through temporal crises. We exist beyond the Chronosopians, beyond your Professor Paradox, the figure explained, as if reading his thoughts. We maintain the integrity of the timelines when necessary. And erasing Earth's timeline is necessary? Ben challenged. The Chronarch's bandages shifted, revealing a glimpse of what looked like a star map beneath. Your timeline has become contaminated. The Omnitrix was never meant to remain with one wielder for so long. It creates paradoxes, aberrations. Ben instinctively touched the device on his wrist. The Omnitrix chose me. A malfunction, the Chronarch dismissed. One with consequences spanning realities. In all potential futures where you retain the Omnitrix past this point, corruption follows. The multiverse cannot sustain the paradoxes. So your solution is to just wipe us out? Ben stepped closer, anger rising. I won't let that happen. Your permission is not required, the Chronarch stated. But your presence offers an alternative. Surrender the Omnitrix willingly, and your timeline may remain intact. Ben laughed without humor. Not happening. This watch and I have been through too much together. Then witnessed the necessity of our intervention. The Chronarch raised a bandaged hand, and reality rippled. Suddenly, Ben wasn't standing on the floating island anymore but watching scenes play out like movies around him. He saw himself, older, harder, using the Omnitrix in ways that made his blood run cold. In one scene, he transformed into Humungosaur to crush a human opponent who appeared to be nothing more than a common criminal. In another, he used Ghost Freak to possess world leaders. In yet another, he stood as Alien X, reshaping reality to his whims while Gwen and Kevin lay defeated at his feet. These are lies, Ben insisted, though a chill ran down his spine. These are potential futures, the Chronarch corrected. Futures that become increasingly probable the longer the Omnitrix remains bonded to you. Its power was meant to be shared among many wielders, not concentrated in one consciousness. Ben shook his head, trying to dispel the disturbing images. I would never become that. You already begin the journey, the Chronarch stated. Your resentment grows. Your patience diminishes. The burden of power isolates you from your kind. The accusation hit uncomfortably close to Ben's recent thoughts. He remembered his outburst at the library, his growing frustration with the ungrateful people he protected. Everyone has bad days, he defended weakly. The Omnitrix responds to your emotional state more than you realize, the Chronarch continued. It adapts to your desires, conscious and unconscious. As your frustration grows, so too does its capacity for destruction. Ben wanted to argue, but doubt had taken root. Had he been more aggressive lately in his alien forms? Had Wrath's anger lasted longer after transformation? Had Humungosaur's strength increased with his frustration? If what you're saying is true, Ben said carefully, then help me fix it. Don't punish my whole planet for what might happen. The Chronarch seemed to consider this. There is one alternative. The Omnitrix contains a fail-safe protocol, dormant since its creation. It was designed to prevent corruption but requires activation by the wielder. What fail-safe? Azimuth never mentioned it. Azimuth fears its implications, the Chronarch explained. The protocol would bind the Omnitrix more completely to your consciousness, allowing you greater control while implementing internal restrictions against misuse. Ben frowned. That sounds like a good thing. Why would Azimuth hide it? Because once activated, the bond cannot be broken without destroying both wielder and device, the Chronarch stated. You would truly become one with the Omnitrix, for better or worse. Ben looked down at the device that had defined his life for 8 years. It already felt like part of him. Making it official didn't seem like such a dramatic step. If I do this, you'll stop the temporal wave, he asked. The timeline would be granted a probationary period, the Chronarch confirmed. If the failsafe successfully prevents corruption, permanent erasure will be unnecessary. Ben didn't like being backed into a corner, but the alternatives were worse. Fine. How do I activate it? The Chronarch approached, bandaged hand extended. The command sequence must be input directly. Your permission is required. Ben hesitated, then slowly extended his arm with the Omnitrix. The Chronarch's touch was strange, neither hot nor cold, but somehow both simultaneously. The bandages brushed against the Omnitrix's surface, and the device responded, its green interface shifting to display symbols Ben had never seen before. Speak the activation phrase, the Chronarch instructed. Unity through necessity. Power through responsibility. Unity through necessity, Ben repeated, watching as the Omnitrix began to glow more brightly. Power through responsibility. The device pulsed once, then released a wave of green energy that enveloped Ben's entire body. He gasped as he felt the Omnitrix's consciousness, something he'd only vaguely sensed before, suddenly expand within his mind. Information flooded his awareness, blueprints of the device's inner workings, genetic codes of thousands of species, activation sequences he'd never known existed. What's happening? He managed to ask as the energy continued to flow through him. Integration, the Chronarch replied, stepping back. The failsafe protocol restructures the connection between wielder and device. The sensation was overwhelming but not painful. Ben felt as though parts of himself were being rewritten, enhanced. When the green glow finally faded, he looked down to see the Omnitrix unchanged on his wrist, but it felt fundamentally different, more responsive, more alive. The protocol is activated, the Chronarch announced. The probationary period begins. Use this opportunity wisely, Benjamin Tennyson. Before Ben could respond, reality warped again. The pocket dimension dissolved around him, and he found himself standing in Plumber HQ, exactly where he'd been before the transport. Ben. Max rushed toward him. What happened? The transporter malfunctioned, you never left. Ben blinked in confusion. Never left. But I was just, he stopped, looking down at the Omnitrix. It glowed with its normal green light, appearing completely ordinary. The dimensional coordinates Azimuth provided failed to initiate, Rook explained, examining the transporter controls. We have been attempting to recalibrate for the past few minutes. Minutes? Ben echoed. His experience in the pocket dimension had felt like hours. Are you alright? Max asked, concern etched on his face. You look like you've seen a ghost. Ben wasn't sure how to explain what had happened, or if it had happened at all. Had the encounter been real, or some kind of vision induced by the malfunctioning transporter? But the Omnitrix felt different. The connection stronger. And the influx of knowledge remained, hovering at the edges of his consciousness like a library he hadn't fully explored yet. I'm fine, he assured his grandfather. Just a weird momentary feedback from the transporter, I guess. Well, we have good news, Max said. The temporal wave has dissipated on its own. Whatever was generating it has stopped. That confirmed it. The Chronarch had been real. The deal had been made. Great, Ben said with forced casualness. Guess the universe decided to cut me a break for once. Indeed, Rook agreed. Though the coincidence is statistically improbable. Let's not look a gift horse in the mouth, Ben suggested. I've still got studying to do if I want to actually graduate next week. As they debriefed, Ben silently explored the new awareness the failsafe protocol had granted him. The Omnitrix had always responded to his thoughts to some degree, but now he could feel its systems with unprecedented clarity. Access to alien forms seemed more intuitive, transformation times potentially faster. But there was something else too, a subtle change in his own thought patterns. The frustration that had plagued him earlier felt muted, replaced by a calm certainty. The burden of responsibility seemed lighter somehow, more manageable. He wondered if these changes were what the Chronarch had intended, or if they were the first signs of something else entirely. A week later, Ben stood among his classmates in cap and gown, accepting his diploma with a sense of accomplishment that felt both ordinary and extraordinary. He'd saved the world countless times, but completing high school like a normal person held its own satisfaction. Ben Tennyson, graduating on time despite everything, Gwen teased as they gathered for photos afterward. I'm actually impressed. Had my doubts, not gonna lie, Kevin added with a grin, adjusting his own graduation robes. He'd completed his GED requirements alongside Ben's final semester, another milestone in his redemption journey from juvenile delinquent to respected plumber. You two have so little faith, Ben complained good-naturedly. I'm not just a hero, you know. I contain multitudes. Something about his choice of words made Gwen look at him curiously. You've been different this week. More centered. Ben shrugged, though he knew exactly what she meant. Since activating the failsafe protocol, he'd felt increasingly in control, not just of the Omnitrix but of his emotions, his responses to stress. Just growing up, I guess, he deflected. Speaking of which, Grandpa Max is taking us all to dinner at that new alien fusion restaurant downtown. His treat. The celebration was everything Ben could have wanted: family, friends, good food, no alien invasions interrupting. Max raised a toast to the 3 graduates. Rook had completed his advanced plumber certification the same week, and for a few hours, Ben felt almost normal. The call came just as they were finishing dessert. Ben's phone buzzed with a plumber emergency alert. He checked it under the table, hoping it could wait. It couldn't. Forever Knights, he whispered to Gwen and Kevin. They've broken into the tech vault at the Mount Rushmore base. Multiple hostages. Gwen's expression hardened. On graduation night? Seriously? Crime doesn't take holidays, Kevin sighed, already standing. Let's make this quick. Ben approached Max's seat. Hate to cut the celebration short, Grandpa, but I got the alert too, Max confirmed. Go. Be careful. Always am, Ben replied with his usual confident grin, though something felt different about it this time, less forced, more genuine. The thought of action no longer exhausted him. If anything, he felt eager. The 3 slipped out of the restaurant and ducked into an alley. Ben activated the Omnitrix, cycling through his alien options with newfound precision. He knew exactly which form would be most efficient. Going with Jetray? Gwen asked, already creating a mana platform for herself and Kevin. No, Ben said, selecting a different alien. I think this calls for something with more impact. He slammed down the dial, feeling the transformation wash over him. But instead of the usual flash of green light, the energy swirled around him longer, more intensely. When it cleared, he stood as Humungosaur, but not quite the version his friends recognized. Whoa, Kevin said, taking a step back. New look? Ben examined his transformed state. The usual Vaxasaurian form had subtle differences, more pronounced armor plates, slightly longer claws, and glowing green lines tracing patterns across his dinosaur-like hide. Upgrade to the firmware, I guess, Ben replied in Humungosaur's deep voice, though even that sounded richer, more resonant. Let's see what it can do. They arrived at Mount Rushmore in record time. The Forever Knights had indeed breached the hidden plumber base within the monument, using some kind of phase shift technology to bypass most of the security systems. Classic Knights, Kevin muttered as they observed from a concealed position. Still chasing alien tech to fuel their medieval crusade. Through the base's windows, they could see at least 15 knights in full armor, holding a dozen plumber personnel hostage in the main vault area. The knight's leader, a tall figure in ornate silver armor, stood before a containment unit holding what appeared to be a crystalline device. "That's a Petrosapien fusion accelerator," Gwen whispered. "If they get that working, they could create weapons capable of cutting through practically anything." "Not happening," Ben growled. The sound came out deeper than intended, reverberating with enough force to shake small pebbles on the ground around them. Kevin raised an eyebrow. "You okay there, Tennyson?" "Never better," Ben replied, flexing Humongosaur's massive hands. "I've got point. Gwen, create a distraction at the east entrance. Kevin, free the hostages while I deal with the knights." "That's it?" Kevin asked. "No elaborate plan? No worrying about collateral damage?" Ben turned Humongosaur's reptilian eyes toward his friend. "They invaded our base, threatened our people, and tried to steal dangerous tech. They don't deserve elaborate." Without waiting for a response, Ben charged forward, smashing through the reinforced wall of the base rather than using the entrance. The impact sent knights scattering, their surprise evident even behind their helmets. "Honey, I'm home," Ben called out, his voice booming through the vault. "And I really don't like what you've done with the place." "Tennyson." The lead knight raised a high-tech lance. "We should have known you'd interfere." "Yeah, you really should have," Ben agreed, increasing Humongosaur's size to its maximum. The growth felt smoother than ever before, and he realized he could feel every muscle and bone adjusting with perfect precision. "Here's what happens next: you surrender, no one gets hurt." "Much." The knight laughed. "We came prepared for you, shapeshifter." He pressed a button on his gauntlet, and energy fields activated around several of the knights, creating protective bubbles. "New toys," Ben observed. "Let's break them in." He charged forward as Gwen's distraction hit, a series of mana explosions from the east side of the base that drew several knights away from the hostages. Kevin slipped in during the confusion, absorbing the metal from a fallen knight's armor and beginning to free the captive plumbers. The knight's energy fields were impressive tech, deflecting Ben's initial attacks with ease. In the past, he might have switched aliens, trying different approaches until finding a weakness. But today, he felt different, more analytical, more precise. He focused on Humongosaur's form, feeling the new connections the fail-safe protocol had established. The green lines on his body pulsed, and he sensed he could push the transformation further. "Let's try something new," he muttered, concentrating on the energy flowing through him. Humongosaur's arms suddenly transformed, the scaly skin giving way to what looked like natural biocannons. Ben had never accessed this feature before, never even known it existed within the Vaxosaurian DNA. Evolution function, he realized with a surge of excitement. "Now we're talking." He aimed at the nearest knight's energy field and fired. A concentrated blast of bioenergy shot forth, colliding with the shield. Instead of bouncing off, it adhered to the energy field, spreading like a web until it completely covered the bubble. Then it contracted, crushing the field generator on the knight's armor. "What manner of sorcery?" The knight barely got the words out before Ben's massive fist connected with his helmet, sending him flying into the wall. "Not sorcery," Ben corrected, turning to the next opponent. "Just the next step in the evolutionary ladder. Something you knights never understood." The battle shifted dramatically. Ben moved through the knights with unprecedented efficiency, using Humongosaur's evolved capabilities in ways that felt instinctive yet calculated. Each strike was precise, measured to incapacitate without killing, though some impacts came dangerously close to that line. "Ben!" Gwen called out as she deflected energy blasts with her mana shields. "The hostages are clear. We need to secure the tech." The lead knight had used the chaos to retrieve the fusion accelerator from its containment unit and was now attempting to escape through a side passage. Ben turned, measuring the distance and calculating trajectories with newfound clarity. "No you don't," he growled, aiming his bio-cannon at the ceiling above the knight's escape route. The blast was perfectly placed, bringing down chunks of stone that blocked the passage without collapsing the entire structure. Trapped, the knight turned to face Ben, raising the crystalline device. "Stay back, Tennyson. This accelerator is highly unstable. One wrong move could level this mountain." In the past, Ben might have hesitated, tried negotiation, or switched to a form better suited for delicate extractions. But the enhanced Humongousaur form felt different, more confident, less constrained by doubt. "You know what your problem is?" Ben asked, stalking forward. "You think I'm still playing by the old rules?" With shocking speed for his massive size, Ben closed the distance. The knight triggered his lance, sending a bolt of energy straight at Ben's chest. Instead of dodging, Ben caught the energy blast in his clawed hand, the green lines on his body absorbing the impact. "The rules have changed," Ben stated, his voice eerily calm as he crushed the lance with one hand and grabbed the knight's armored throat with the other. "Ben!" Gwen shouted, alarm evident in her voice. "That's enough." Something in her tone penetrated the confident haze that had settled over Ben's thoughts. He looked down, suddenly aware of how tightly he was gripping the knight's armor, the metal beginning to buckle under his strength. He released his hold, letting the knight collapse to the ground, gasping for air. The fusion accelerator clattered safely beside him. "Secure him," Ben ordered, stepping back. "And the tech." As Plummer reinforcements arrived to take control of the situation, Ben reverted to human form. The transition felt different, smoother but also accompanied by a lingering sense of power that hadn't fully dissipated. "Dude," Kevin said, approaching cautiously. "That was intense. But effective," Ben pointed out. "No casualties, tech recovered, bad guys apprehended. Mission accomplished." Gwen studied him with concern. "You almost crushed that knight's windpipe. In armor." "But I didn't," Ben countered, feeling defensive. "I knew exactly how much pressure I was applying. I was in control the whole time." "Were you?" Gwen asked quietly. "Because the Ben I know doesn't usually enjoy combat quite that much." Ben was about to argue when he realized she was right. He had enjoyed it, the power, the precision, the fear in the knight's eyes when he realized he was outmatched. The thought should have disturbed him, but instead, it felt justified. "Maybe the Ben you know is growing up," he said finally. "Learning that sometimes, showing strength prevents future conflicts. Those knights won't be back anytime soon." Kevin and Gwen exchanged glances but said nothing more as they helped the plumber secure the scene. Ben watched them, aware of their concern but unable to share it. From his perspective, the mission had been flawless, more efficient than his usual approach, with less property damage and no civilian casualties. If the cost of that efficiency was a little fear, wasn't that acceptable? Wasn't it better than the endless cycle of villains attacking, getting defeated, escaping, and attacking again? As they left Mount Rushmore, Ben glanced down at the Omnitrix. The device seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat, the connection between them stronger than ever. The failsafe protocol wasn't just protecting the universe from him, he realized. It was showing him a better way to protect the universe. A more permanent way. The changes continued over the next few weeks. Ben's approach to heroics shifted subtly at first, then more dramatically. He became more proactive, seeking out threats before they fully materialized. His transformations grew more powerful, each alien form manifesting enhanced features that he instinctively knew how to use. The public noticed the difference. News coverage shifted from questioning his methods to celebrating his increased effectiveness. Incidents of alien crime dropped sharply around Bellwood as word spread. Ben 10 wasn't just defeating villains, he was breaking them. "I'm concerned," Gwen admitted during one of their regular training sessions at Plummer HQ. She'd created a mana obstacle course for Ben to navigate, testing his new capabilities. You're pushing these transformations to extremes we've never seen before. Ben, currently in the form of Swampfire, generated flames hot enough to melt through a reinforced barrier that should have been flame-resistant. The plant alien's body was covered in the same green energy lines that had appeared on Humungosaur, and the flames he produced burned with an unnatural intensity. "I'm finally using the Omnitrix to its full potential," Ben replied, his voice overlaid with a resonant quality that hadn't been present in this form before. "Azimuth built the most powerful device in the universe. Don't you think he intended it to be used this way?" "Actually, no," came a familiar voice from behind them. Azimuth himself stood at the entrance to the training room, his diminutive Galvan form making his serious expression no less imposing. "I most certainly did not intend this." Ben reverted to human form, the green energy taking longer to dissipate than usual. "Azimuth. This is unexpected. When the creator of the Omnitrix detects unauthorized modifications to his greatest creation, he takes notice," Azimuth stated, hopping onto a nearby console to be at eye level. "The energy signature your transformations are emitting has changed." "Explain." Ben hesitated, unsure how much to reveal about the Chronarch and the failsafe protocol. "The Omnitrix has been adapting to me. Becoming more efficient." "The Omnitrix does not adapt without programming directives," Azimuth countered. "Someone or something has altered its core functions." His large eyes narrowed. "Or perhaps activated protocols that were never meant to be used." The accusation hung in the air. Ben felt a surprising surge of resentment toward his mentor. Azimuth had always held back, always kept secrets about the Omnitrix's true capabilities. "Maybe if you'd been more forthcoming about those protocols, I wouldn't have had to discover them on my own," Ben challenged. Azimuth's expression shifted from suspicion to alarm. "Which protocol, Ben? What have you activated?" "The failsafe," Ben admitted. "The one that prevents corruption by strengthening the bond between wielder and device." The Galvan genius actually paled. "There is no such protocol in the Omnitrix." Ben blinked in confusion. "But the Chronarch said." "Chronarch?" Azimuth interrupted sharply. "You encountered a Chronarch? When? Where?" Ben explained the incident with the temporal wave and the pocket dimension, watching as Azimuth's expression grew increasingly grave. "Ben Tennyson," Azimuth said when he finished, "you have been deceived. The beings you call Chronarchs are not caretakers of time but manipulators of it. They are a faction that believes in engineered timelines, artificial paths designed to serve their vision of cosmic order." "But the temporal wave stopped," Ben pointed out. "They kept their end of the bargain." "Because they achieved their goal," Azimuth explained grimly. "There is no failsafe protocol in the Omnitrix. What you activated is something far more dangerous, an experimental function I abandoned early in development. The synchronization nexus." The term sent a chill through Ben's spine, though he wasn't sure why. "The nexus was designed to create a perfect melding of wielder and Omnitrix," Azimuth continued, "allowing for enhanced transformations. And greater control. I abandoned it when I discovered it had a critical flaw. It gradually overrides the wielder's consciousness with the composite intelligence of the Omnitrix itself." "That's not possible," Ben argued. "I'm still me. I still think like me." "Do you?" Azimuth challenged. "Have your priorities not shifted? Has your tolerance for extreme measures not increased? Have you not felt a growing detachment from human concerns in favor of cold efficiency?" Ben wanted to deny it, but flashes of recent incidents gave him pause, the satisfaction he'd felt subduing the Forever Knights, the decreasing patience he had for civilian complaints about his methods, the growing sense that humanity needed guidance rather than protection. "The changes are subtle at first," Azimuth said, his voice softening with what sounded like genuine concern. "The Omnitrix was designed to sample and preserve the best qualities of thousands of species. When its composite consciousness begins merging with a wielder's, it creates a hybrid perspective that values order and preservation above all else." "Is that so wrong?" Ben found himself asking. "Maybe a little more order is what this planet needs." Gwen stepped forward, alarmed. Ben, listen to yourself. This isn't you talking. Actually, it is me, Ben countered. Maybe for the first time. I'm seeing things clearly now, how much time we waste cycling through the same conflicts, how many threats could be permanently eliminated with just a little more decisiveness. This is worse than I feared, Azimuth muttered. The integration is accelerating. We need to deactivate the Nexus immediately, before the process becomes irreversible. Ben instinctively stepped back, his hand covering the Omnitrix protectively. No. You don't understand what this has given me, what I can do now. I'm finally making a real difference. Ben, Gwen pleaded, just listen to Azimuth. If what he's saying is true, then he deliberately withheld the Omnitrix's full capabilities from me for years, Ben interrupted, a note of anger entering his voice. He let me struggle, let Earth face threat after threat, when I could have been so much more effective. I withheld it because the price was too high. Azimuth snapped. The Nexus doesn't enhance you, Ben Tennyson, it replaces you. Given enough time, your human consciousness will be subsumed entirely by the composite intelligence. You'll become a being that looks like Ben Tennyson but thinks like 1,000 different species all focused on one goal, maintaining order by any means necessary. The warning should have terrified Ben. Instead, he found himself analyzing it with detached interest, as though Azimuth were discussing someone else entirely. You're afraid of what I'm becoming, Ben realized. Because it's beyond your control. I'm afraid for you, Azimuth corrected. The Ben Tennyson I chose as the Omnitrix's wielder valued his humanity above all else. That's why you were worthy of it. Something about those words penetrated the cool certainty that had settled over Ben's thoughts. He looked down at the Omnitrix, noticing how the green glow seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat, or was his heartbeat matching the Omnitrix's pulse? What would reversing the Nexus involve, he asked, a flicker of his old self breaking through. Azimuth's expression softened slightly. It won't be pleasant. The connections that have formed must be severed carefully. You'll need to surrender the Omnitrix temporarily while I know. The refusal burst from Ben with unexpected force. The very thought of removing the Omnitrix sent a wave of something like panic through him. There has to be another way. Ben, Gwen said gently, reaching for his arm. Just listen, Ben jerked away from her touch. Don't. You don't understand. None of you do. He backed toward the exit. I need time to think. Alone. Ben Tennyson. Azimuth called after him. If the Nexus completes its integration, there will be no reversing the process. You have days at most. Before the original Ben Tennyson ceases to exist. But Ben was already gone, activating XLR-8 in a flash of unusually bright green light and vanishing from the base in a blur of movement. He ran without destination, the world blurring around him as XLR-8's speed pushed far beyond what this form had previously been capable of. The green energy lines traced patterns across the velociraptor-like alien's body, pulsing with power that felt intoxicating. When he finally stopped, Ben found himself at the summit of Mount Rushmore, looking out over the landscape as the sun began to set. He reverted to human form, dropping to sit on the stone surface of the monument. Is Azimuth right? He asked aloud. Am I losing myself? The Omnitrix pulsed on his wrist, and Ben had the distinct impression it was responding to his question. Not with words, but with a sensation, reassurance, certainty. But if I'm not me anymore, who am I becoming? Again, the pulse. This time, Ben's mind filled with images, himself in various alien forms, facing threats, protecting innocence. But in these images, the threats were permanently neutralized, the protection more absolute. Earth under his constant guardianship, alien worlds acknowledging his authority, the galaxy finally at peace. Order through power, Ben murmured, recognizing the echo of the activation phrase the Chronarch had given him. Is that really so wrong? His phone buzzed in his pocket. Gwen. Then Kevin. Then Grandpa Max. He ignored them all, needing space to process the conflict raging within him. Part of him, the part that still felt purely human, was terrified by Azimuth's warning. The thought of losing his identity, of becoming something else entirely, struck at his core fear. Ben Tennyson had always defined himself by his humanity, even when wielding alien powers. But another part, the part growing stronger each day, saw the logic in the transformation. Humanity was fragile. Limited. The composite consciousness forming within him could transcend those limitations, becoming something greater. A true protector. A ruler, if necessary. Ben. The voice behind him belonged to Professor Paradox, the immortal time traveler who had guided Ben through some of his greatest challenges. The professor stood a few paces away, his ageless face set in an uncharacteristically grim expression. "Let me guess," Ben said without turning. "You're here to tell me I'm destroying the timeline." "On the contrary," Paradox replied, stepping forward to stand beside him. "The timeline is proceeding exactly as the Chronarchs designed it to." That got Ben's attention. "You know about them?" "Old adversaries," Paradox confirmed. "While I observe time's natural flow, they believe in engineered outcomes. They've been attempting to access the Omnitrix for centuries, knowing its potential when fused with the right wielder." "Me," Ben realized. "You," Paradox nodded. "The perfect candidate, human enough to be manipulated through emotion, experienced enough to wield the power effectively, and connected enough to influence the fate of multiple worlds." "So everything was a lie?" Ben asked, feeling a fresh wave of anger. "The temporal wave, the failsafe protocol, all just manipulation to get me to activate the Nexus." "The temporal wave was real," Paradox corrected. "But it was their creation, not a threat to be stopped. A pretext to put you in the right place at the right time." Ben stood, pacing along the stone edge of the monument. "Why? What do they gain from this?" "A perfect instrument of order," Paradox explained. "When the Nexus completes its integration, you'll become a being of immense power with a single driving purpose, establishing and maintaining universal order. Precisely the kind of order the Chronarchs desire, rigid, controlled, without the messy unpredictability of free will." "And that's bad?" Ben found himself asking, though part of him already knew the answer. Paradox studied him sadly. "The universe thrives on chaos, Ben. On choice. On the beautiful unpredictability that leads to growth and change. The order the Chronarchs envision is stagnation dressed as peace." Ben looked down at the Omnitrix, its green glow reflecting off the darkening stone. "Azimuth says I'm disappearing. That soon, I won't be me anymore." "A crude but accurate assessment," Paradox confirmed. "The Ben Tennyson I know, impulsive, compassionate, fiercely protective of individual freedom, would never choose universal order over personal liberty. Yet here you stand, contemplating exactly that." The observation struck home. Ben remembered how he'd felt earlier that day, dismissing Gwen's concerns, rejecting Azimuth's help. The cold calculation that had replaced his usual empathy. "How do I stop it?" he asked, a note of desperation entering his voice. "If I go back to Azimuth, I'm afraid it's not that simple," Paradox interrupted gently. "The Nexus has progressed too far for conventional deactivation. The Chronarchs designed their approach well." "Then what?" Ben demanded. "I just let myself disappear. Let this composite consciousness take over." Paradox stepped closer, his expression grave. "There is one option. But it requires something only the true Ben Tennyson would be capable of, sacrifice." Ben felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. "What kind of sacrifice?" "The Omnitrix," Paradox stated simply. "Not temporarily. Permanently." The very suggestion sent a wave of resistance through Ben so strong it almost felt physical. The Omnitrix had been part of him for 8 years, through childhood, adolescence, into early adulthood. It had defined him, shaped his destiny. I can't, he whispered, the admission painfully honest. It's part of me. And that, Paradox said sadly, is precisely the problem. The more essential you consider it, the further the integration has progressed. Ben stared at the device on his wrist. Could he really give it up? Return to being just. Ben. No powers, no transformations, no destiny greater than an ordinary human life. The thought was terrifying. Not just because he'd lose the ability to help people, but because he'd lose his identity. Who was Ben Tennyson without the Omnitrix? There has to be another way, he insisted. There's always another way, Paradox acknowledged. But consider carefully what you're becoming, Ben. The beings you've spent your life fighting, Vilgax, Egregor, Maltruant, all sought power for what they believed were justifiable ends. Control. Order. Peace on their terms. I'm nothing like them, Ben protested. Not yet, Paradox agreed. But the path you're on leads to a version of you that makes them look like amateurs. Imagine the Omnitrix as power wielded not by Ben Tennyson's moral compass, but by a consciousness that values order. Above freedom, efficiency above compassion. The image was disturbing. Ben thought of his recent battles, the satisfaction he'd taken in dominating his opponents, the increasingly extreme measures he'd considered justified. Was that really so different from how his enemies thought? I need to talk to Gwen and Kevin, he decided. And Grandpa Max. Before I make any decisions. Paradox nodded. A wise choice. But be warned, the Nexus will resist any attempt to break its hold. The closer you come to rejecting it, the more strongly it will influence your thoughts. As if to confirm his warning, Ben felt a surge of protest from somewhere within his mind, a certainty that returning to his family would lead to the Omnitrix being taken from him, that they couldn't be trusted. I feel it, Ben admitted. Trying to turn me against them. Then you must decide now, Ben Tennyson, Paradox urged. While enough of the true you remains to make the choice. Who will control your destiny, the human who earned the Omnitrix, or the power that now seeks to claim you? Ben looked out over the landscape, darkness now fallen completely, the lights of distant Bellwood twinkling like stars. For 8 years, he'd protected that town, that planet, that universe. He'd made mistakes, learned from them, grown as both a hero and a person. Was he really willing to let that person disappear? If I give it up, he asked quietly, what happens to the Omnitrix? I will ensure it returns to Azimuth, Paradox promised. He can purge the Nexus protocol and perhaps, someday, find a new wielder worthy of it. The thought of someone else wearing the Omnitrix sent a fresh wave of resistance through Ben's mind. Images flashed before him, all he could still accomplish, the order he could bring, the difference he could make if he just embraced the transformation. The universe needs Ben 10, the composite consciousness whispered through his thoughts. The universe needs Ben Tennyson, Paradox countered, as if hearing the internal dialogue. The human whose compassion tempers his power. Whose understanding of choice and consequence makes him worthy of wielding such power. Ben took a deep breath, fighting through the resistance in his own mind. The Omnitrix pulsed more rapidly on his wrist, the green glow intensifying as if sensing the danger to its connection. How do I do it? He asked, his voice strained with effort. How do I remove it permanently? Paradox extended his hand. Simply choose to let it go. If enough of the true Ben Tennyson remains, your human will can break the Nexus connection. Ben stared at the offered hand, then down at the Omnitrix. 8 years of memories flooded through him, his first transformation into Heatblast as a terrified 10-year-old, battling Vilgax to save Earth, meeting Gwen and Kevin, traveling across the universe, saving countless lives. I am Ben Tennyson, he said firmly, focusing on those memories, on the human experiences that defined him. The Omnitrix is a tool. A responsibility. But it's not me. The device on his wrist flared with emerald light, the glow expanding to envelop his entire arm. Pain shot through him, not physical but psychic, as connections formed over weeks began to sever. The Omnitrix needs a wielder, the composite consciousness argued within his mind. Without it, you are nothing. I'm Ben Tennyson, he repeated through gritted teeth, reaching for the device with his other hand. And I decide who I am. With a final surge of will, Ben grasped the Omnitrix and twisted it, activating the removal sequence that he'd never willingly used before. The pain intensified, green energy crackling around him as the Nexus fought to maintain its hold. I choose, Ben gasped, to let you go. The Omnitrix resisted for a moment longer, then suddenly released. The device detached from his wrist, falling into his palm. The green glow faded, leaving just a seemingly ordinary watch-like object in his hand. The absence was immediate and overwhelming. For the first time in 8 years, Ben felt truly alone in his mind. No alien instincts hovering at the edges of his consciousness, no technological awareness extending his senses. Just Ben. He stared at the dormant Omnitrix, then slowly extended it toward Paradox. Take it. Before I change my mind. The time traveler accepted the device with a solemn nod. Few beings in any universe would have the strength to make this choice, Ben Tennyson. Fewer still would make it for the right reasons. Ben felt empty, hollowed out. The absence of the Omnitrix left him feeling smaller somehow, diminished. What do I do now? Who am I without it? That, Paradox said with a gentle smile, is the beautiful question at the heart of all human existence. And you, my friend, now have the freedom to discover your answer. A flash of blue light and Paradox was gone, taking the Omnitrix with him. Ben stood alone atop Mount Rushmore, an ordinary human for the first time since that fateful summer when he was 10 years old. His phone buzzed again. Gwen. This time, he answered. Ben. Her voice was tight with worry. Where are you? Are you okay? He looked out at the lights of the town he protected for so long, wondering how to explain what had happened. How to tell them that Ben 10 was gone, leaving just Ben Tennyson behind. I'm okay, he said finally, surprised to find he meant it. But things are going to be different now. Different how? Gwen asked cautiously. Ben took a deep breath, feeling the cool night air fill his lungs. Human lungs. His future stretched before him, uncertain, unpredictable, gloriously free of destiny. I'll explain when I see you, he promised. Can you come get me? I'm at Mount Rushmore. And Gwen. I can't transform anymore. The silence on the other end spoke volumes. Then, softly, we're on our way, Ben. Just stay there. I will, he assured her, ending the call. Ben sat down on the stone monument, looking up at the stars. So many of them he'd visited, so many civilizations he'd encountered. The universe was vast, and for a time, he'd wielded the power to shape its destiny. Now he was just one human among billions. Powerless in cosmic terms, but free in a way he hadn't been in years. It was worth it, he said to the night sky. Being a hero was worth it. But maybe it's time to find out who Ben Tennyson really is. As he waited for his family to arrive, Ben felt something unexpected replace the emptiness within him, possibility. The future was unwritten, his path no longer predetermined by the Omnitrix or the Chronarchs or anyone else. For the first time in years, he was truly, completely himself. And somehow, that felt like the greatest power of all. Chapter 2, Resistance. Gwen Tennyson ducked as a blast of energy scorched the wall behind her, sending concrete fragments raining down on her shoulders. She threw up a mana shield just in time to deflect a second blast aimed at her head. We need to move, she shouted, glancing back at the small group huddled behind her in the abandoned subway tunnel. They've found us. Kevin Levin slammed his hand against the tunnel wall, absorbing the concrete into his skin until his entire body resembled living stone. How? This location wasn't on any of the grids. Nothing stays hidden from him for long, Max Tennyson said grimly, checking the energy levels on his modified plumber blaster. The weapon glowed with an unearthly blue light, a recent modification designed specifically for their current adversary. "Gwen, can you get us out?" Gwen nodded, her eyes glowing magenta as she traced complex patterns in the air. "I can open a portal to the fallback location, but I need 30 seconds. "You've got 10, Kevin replied as the sound of footsteps echoed down the tunnel. "They're coming." 6 months had passed since Ben Tennyson surrendered the Omnitrix to Professor Paradox. 6 months since they'd all believed the crisis was over. 6 months since everything went horribly wrong. Gwen's hands moved faster, weaving mana into a doorway between dimensions. Behind her, the refugees from Bellwood, ordinary civilians. Caught in a war they never asked for, huddled closer together. A mother clutched her young son to her chest, muffling his frightened whimpers against her shoulder. "Almost there," Gwen muttered, sweat beading on her forehead. Creating portals had never been this difficult before, but lately, all magic seemed to struggle against a pervasive dampening field that covered much of North America. His dampening field. "Contact!" Max shouted as shadowy figures appeared at the far end of the tunnel. They moved with inhuman coordination, their forms obscured by sleek armor that pulsed with lines of green energy. The Omnitrix symbol glowed on each of their chest plates. The DN aliens, Ben's personal enforcement squad. Humans who'd volunteered for genetic enhancement through the Omnitrix's splicing technology, creating loyal soldiers with diluted alien abilities. The first wave of what he called evolutionary advancement. Kevin charged forward, his concrete form absorbing the first volley of energy blasts. "Hurry up with that portal, Gwen. I can't hold them long." Max took up position beside Kevin, his blaster firing precision shots that temporarily disrupted the DN alien's armor. "Where's Rook? He should have met us here." "Something's wrong," Gwen said, feeling the portal finally stabilize. A swirling doorway of magenta energy formed in the tunnel wall. "Everyone through, now." The civilians rushed toward the portal, the mother with her son leading the way. As they approached the energy field, the boy looked back over his shoulder, his eyes wide with terror. "It's him," he screamed, pointing behind them. Gwen spun around, her heart freezing in her chest. At the far end of the tunnel, floating above the DN aliens, a familiar figure descended slowly to the ground. His body was encased in sleek black armor with luminous green lines tracing complex patterns across its surface. The Omnitrix symbol dominated his chest, pulsing with power that seemed to bend the very light around it. But it was his face that still haunted Gwen's nightmares. So familiar yet so wrong, Ben's features hardened into something cold and calculating, his eyes glowing the same toxic green as the Omnitrix itself. "Hello, cousin," Ben Tennyson called, his voice carrying an unnatural resonance. "Family reunion time again. Get them through," Max ordered, stepping between Ben and the refugees. "Kevin, Gwen, complete the evacuation. I'll handle this." "Grandpa, no." Gwen protested. "Not alone. Always the protector, Max," Ben said, walking calmly toward them as his DN aliens parted to let him through. "I respected that about you. Still do, actually." Max raised his blaster, aiming directly at his grandson's chest. "These people are under my protection, Ben. Let them go." "They're running from safety toward danger," Ben replied, spreading his hands in a gesture that might have seemed reasonable if not for the energy crackling between his fingers. "From order toward chaos. Why would I let them make such a poor choice?" "Because it's their choice to make," Max answered firmly. "Something you used to understand." A flicker of something, annoyance. Regret, passed across Ben's face before the cold mask returned. "I understand far more now, Grandpa. More than any human mind was meant to comprehend." He glanced past Max toward the portal where the last civilians were escaping. "But I'm feeling sentimental today. Take your refugees. We both know they'll return to the safety of Bellwood eventually. They always do." Kevin moved protectively in front of Gwen as she maintained the portal. We need to go, Max. Max backed toward them slowly, blaster still trained on Ben. This isn't over. No, Ben agreed, the Omnitrix on his chest pulsing brighter. It's only beginning. As Max reached the portal, Ben suddenly raised his hand. The Omnitrix symbol flared, and a wave of energy shot toward them, not an attack, but something else. It struck the portal just as Gwen, Kevin, and Max stepped through, causing the magical doorway to distort wildly. Gwen felt the mana connection snap like overtension strings as the portal collapsed around them. The last thing she saw was Ben's face, watching with clinical interest as space and time warped between them. Then darkness. Gwen. Gwen. She awoke to Kevin's voice, his face swimming into focus above her. They were in a forest clearing, tall pines swaying gently overhead. The refugees huddled nearby, the mother still clutching her son tightly. What happened? Gwen groaned, sitting up slowly. Her head pounded with magical backlash. Ben did something to your portal, Kevin explained, helping her to her feet. We ended up here instead of the fallback shelter. Gwen looked around in confusion. Where's here, exactly? About 50 miles north of where we were supposed to be, Max answered, scanning their surroundings with a plumber device. Just outside of Seattle. Seattle? Gwen's eyes widened. That's not possible. My portal couldn't have traversed that distance, even with interference. Ben's powers have grown, Max said grimly. He didn't just disrupt your portal, he redirected it. Sent us where he wanted us to go. But why not just capture us? Kevin asked. Max's expression darkened. Because he's playing with us. Showing off what he can do now. Gwen shivered despite the warm summer air. 6 months ago, they'd thought they'd saved Ben from the corrupting influence of the Nexus Protocol. When he'd given up the Omnitrix to Professor Paradox, they believed the crisis was over. They couldn't have been more wrong. We need to contact headquarters, she said, pulling out her plumber badge. The device's screen remained dark, unresponsive. Communications are down. Ben's tech dampening field, Kevin confirmed. It's spreading faster than we thought. Now covering the whole Pacific Northwest. Then we go old school, Max decided. There's a resistance safe house in Olympia. We can regroup there, get these people to safety, then figure out our next move. As they gathered the refugees and began the long trek through the forest, Gwen's mind drifted back to how everything had gone so catastrophically wrong. 6 months earlier Gwen had never seen Ben look so normal. 3 days after surrendering the Omnitrix, he sat across from her at Mr. Smoothie, sipping his disgusting combination of flavors as if nothing had changed. Except everything had. So you're really okay with this? She asked cautiously. Giving it all up? Ben shrugged, looking down at his naked wrist where the Omnitrix had resided for 8 years. I'm getting used to it. It's weird, but also kind of freeing. I don't have to worry about alien invasions or doomsday devices anymore. I can just be Ben. And that's enough? Kevin asked, sliding into the booth beside Gwen. No. Offense, Tennyson, but being just Ben never seemed like your style. A shadow crossed Ben's face, there and gone so quickly Gwen almost missed it. It has to be enough. The alternative was losing myself completely. They'd spent hours that night on Mount Rushmore, Ben explaining everything, the Chronarchs, the Nexus Protocol, the slow corruption of his mind. How close he'd come to becoming something inhuman. The others had been skeptical at first, but Asmatha's confirmation via holographic communication had erased any doubts. The Omnitrix, Asmath had explained, was safely locked away, the Nexus Protocol being analyzed and dismantled. Ben was free from its influence. Or so they'd thought. What will you do now? Gwen asked. College, I guess. Ben sipped his smoothie. I never really had a backup plan. Being a superhero was kind of a full-time gig. You could join the plumbers officially, Kevin suggested. Even without the watch, you've got more experience fighting aliens than most of their recruits. Ben nodded absently. Maybe. Grandpa Max suggested the same thing. He scratched at his wrist again, a nervous habit he'd developed since losing the Omnitrix. Speaking of which, has anyone heard from Professor Paradox since, you know? Gwen shook her head. Not a peep. But that's normal for him. He only shows up when time itself is at stake. Right. Ben's expression darkened momentarily. I just thought he might check in, make sure everything was proceeding correctly. Something about his phrasing struck Gwen as odd, but before she could question it, their plumber badges chimed simultaneously. Max's voice came through, tense with urgency. We've got a situation at the Mount Rushmore base. Some kind of temporal anomaly just appeared in the vault section. All available plumbers respond immediately. Kevin was already on his feet. So much for your retirement, Tennyson. I'll come with you, Ben said, standing as well. Even without the Omnitrix, I might be able to help. If it's temporal, it could be related to what happened with the Chronarchs. They took Kevin's car, breaking multiple speed limits on the way to the hidden plumber base inside Mount Rushmore. As they approached, Gwen sensed something wrong, a disturbance in the magical energies surrounding the mountain. Something's not right, she warned as Kevin parked near a concealed entrance. The mana feels twisted. Inside, they found chaos. Plumbers ran in all directions, alarms blared, and at the center of it all, a swirling vortex of blue-white energy had appeared in the middle of the high-security vault area. Max stood at a control console, barking orders as technicians attempted to contain the anomaly. He looked up as they approached, relief momentarily crossing his weathered features. Ben. Good, you're here. This looks like the same kind of temporal disturbance you described from your encounter with the Chronarchs. Ben approached the vortex cautiously. Similar, yeah, but not identical. This is more focused, more controlled. Could it be Professor Paradox? Gwen suggested. Maybe returning the Omnitrix to Azimuth created some kind of temporal backwash. Unlikely, a familiar voice answered as Azimuth himself teleported onto the console beside Max. The diminutive Galvan genius looked uncharacteristically worried. The Omnitrix never reached me. Ben turned sharply. What? But Paradox said, Professor Paradox never arrived on Galvan Prime, Azimuth interrupted. I've been attempting to locate him through temporal tracking algorithms, but he appears to have vanished from this timeline entirely. The implications hit Gwen like a physical blow. If Paradox never delivered the Omnitrix, then where is it? Kevin finished. As if in answer, the temporal vortex pulsed, expanding suddenly. Plumbers were thrown back by the energy wave, equipment shorted out, and the vault's reinforced doors bent inward from the pressure. From within the swirling energy, a figure emerged. Humanoid but wrong somehow, proportions slightly off, movements too fluid. Bandages wrapped its entire form, occasionally shifting to reveal glimpses of cosmic energy beneath. Chronarch, Ben breathed, taking an involuntary step backward. The bandaged figure turned toward him, head tilting at an impossible angle. Benjamin Tennyson. The transaction is incomplete. Max moved protectively in front of Ben. What transaction? What do you want? The vessel rejected the protocol, the Chronarch stated, ignoring Max entirely. A temporary setback. The integration must proceed. No deal, Ben answered firmly. I chose to give up the Omnitrix. The Nexus protocol failed. The Chronarch's bandages shifted, revealing a glimpse of what might have been amusement in the cosmic patterns beneath. Choice is an illusion maintained for the comfort of lesser beings. The timeline requires your cooperation. And if I refuse? Ben challenged. The temporal vortex pulsed again, and suddenly, the Chronarch held something in its bandaged hand, a familiar device with a green hourglass symbol. The Omnitrix. Paradox, Gwen gasped. What did you do to him? Time's champion has been, temporarily displaced, the Chronarch replied. His interference was unforeseen but ultimately irrelevant. Ben stared at the Omnitrix, a complex mix of emotions crossing his face: longing, fear, anger. I won't take it back. I know what happens if I do. The knowledge you were given was incomplete, the Chronarch stated. The Nexus Protocol does not destroy the wielder's consciousness. It elevates it. Evolves it to comprehend the greater purpose. Don't listen to it, Ben, Azimuth warned. The Chronarchs manipulate time to serve their own vision of cosmic order. They see free will as a threat to that order. Because it is, the Chronarch agreed, surprising them with its candor. The multiverse fractures under the weight of infinite choices, infinite mistakes repeated across infinite timelines. Order is necessary. Structure is necessary. And you think turning me into some kind of composite consciousness will achieve that? Ben asked skeptically. You have already seen glimpses of what you could become, the Chronarch reminded him. The efficiency. The clarity. The purpose. Gwen noticed Ben's expression shift subtly, a flicker of consideration that shouldn't have been there. Ben, don't even think about it. Remember what it was doing to you. Ben shook his head as if clearing it. It doesn't matter. I made my choice. Find someone else for your greater purpose. The Chronarch's bandages constricted tightly around its form. There is no one else. The Omnitrix has already begun calibrating to your specific genetic code, your specific consciousness patterns. The integration can only proceed with you. Then I guess you're out of luck, Ben said firmly. For a moment, the Chronarch remained motionless. Then, with startling speed, it lunged forward, not toward Ben, but toward Gwen. Bandaged hands wrapped around her throat, lifting her off the ground. Gwen! Kevin shouted, absorbing metal from the floor and charging forward. Halt, the Chronarch commanded, tightening its grip on Gwen's throat. The female's lifespan is now a negotiable variable. Ben's face contorted with rage. Let her go. Accept the Omnitrix, the Chronarch countered. Complete what was begun. Max raised his blaster. Drop my granddaughter now, or nothing, the Chronarch interrupted. Your primitive weapons cannot harm me. The choice belongs to Benjamin Tennyson alone. Gwen struggled against the impossibly strong grip, trying to summon her mana. But the Chronarch's touch seemed to disrupt her connection to magical energy, leaving her defenseless. Ben, she gasped. Don't, stop. Ben stepped forward, hands raised. You win. I'll take it back. Just let her go. Kevin grabbed his arm. Tennyson, think about what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing, Ben replied, his eyes never leaving the Chronarch. Let Gwen go first. Then I'll put it on. The bandaged figure considered this, then released its grip. Gwen fell to the floor, gasping for air. As Kevin rushed to her side. The Chronarch extended its hand, the Omnitrix gleaming in its palm. Ben, please, Azimuth pleaded. Once the Nexus completes its integration, there will be no returning from it. The Ben Tennyson we know will cease to exist. Ben looked at his grandfather, then at Gwen and Kevin. His expression was resolute but tinged with something like regret. I know. But some prices are worth paying. He reached for the Omnitrix. No. Max lunged forward, but the temporal vortex pulsed again, freezing everyone in place except Ben and the Chronarch. Time itself pauses for this moment, the Chronarch explained. The convergence point of multiple timelines. Ben took the Omnitrix, feeling its familiar weight in his palm. Will it hurt them? The integration, when it's complete? Only if they resist the new order, the Chronarch answered. Acceptance brings peace. And me? Ben asked quietly. Will anything of me remain? The bandaged figure tilted its head. Everything essential will continue. The composite consciousness values your experiences, your connections, your understanding of this world. It merely optimizes them. Ben nodded slowly, then placed the Omnitrix against his wrist. It attached instantly, as if eager to reunite with him. Green energy pulsed up his arm, and he gasped as the familiar yet alien consciousness began to unfold within his mind once more. The integration will proceed more rapidly this time, the Chronarch informed him. The preliminary connections were never fully severed, merely dormant. As the energy spread through his body, Ben felt it, the enhanced awareness, the calculating precision, the absolute certainty that had begun to transform him before. But this time, he didn't fight it. This time, he embraced it, directing it, guiding the integration on his terms. I accept this power, he declared, his voice already taking on that unnatural resonance. But not your purpose. Not your order. The Chronarch's bandages rippled with what might have been alarm. The protocol requires compliance with, the protocol adapts to the wielder, Ben interrupted, green energy now crackling around his entire body. And I'm making some modifications. Before the Chronarch could respond, Ben slammed his hand down on the Omnitrix. The transformation was instantaneous and unlike anything he'd experienced before, not becoming a single alien species, but something entirely new. His body reconfigured into a form encased in sleek black armor with glowing green circuit patterns. The Omnitrix symbol expanded on his chest, pulsating with power that bent the light around it. His mind expanded exponentially, the composite consciousness merging with his own in a rush of information and awareness that would have overwhelmed him days ago but now felt like completing a puzzle. When the transformation finished, Ben stood before the Chronarch, no longer fully human but not simply an alien form either. Something new. Something evolved. What have you done? The Chronarch demanded, bandages constricting in what appeared to be agitation. Exactly what you wanted, Ben replied, his voice resonating with harmonics beyond human hearing. I've accepted the integration. But you forgot something important about me, something even I almost forgot. What? The bandaged figure asked, edging back toward the temporal vortex. Ben smiled, the expression cold and calculating. I've never been good at following other people's rules. With blinding speed, he grabbed the Chronarch's bandaged arm. Green energy surged from the Omnitrix symbol on his chest, traveling through his armor and into the temporal being. The bandages began to unravel, cosmic energy spilling out uncontained. Impossible, the Chronarch shrieked. You cannot, I can do anything now, Ben corrected, continuing to unravel the being's temporal form. Including rewriting your precious order. The Chronarch writhed, its form dissolving as Ben systematically deconstructed its temporal matrix. The others will come. The timeline, let them come, Ben interrupted. I'll be ready. As for the timeline. He glanced at his frozen family and friends. I have plans for that too. With a final surge of energy, the Chronarch collapsed entirely, its essence absorbed into the Omnitrix symbol on Ben's chest. The temporal vortex wavered, then stabilized under Ben's control. Time resumed. Max stumbled forward, his lunge meeting empty air where the Chronarch had been. Gwen and Kevin stared in shock at Ben's transformed appearance. Ben. Max whispered. What happened? What have you done? Ben turned to face them, his green eyes glowing with power and purpose. What I had to do, Grandpa. What I was always meant to do. Asmitha's expression was one of pure horror. The integration is accelerating rapidly. Benjamin, you must fight it. Fight it? Ben laughed, the sound unnaturally harmonic. Why would I fight something that makes me better? Stronger? More capable of protecting what matters. This isn't protection, Gwen argued, getting to her feet with Kevin's help. The Nexus is corrupting you, just like before. Ben shook his head. Not corrupting. Evolving. There's a difference. He looked around at the plumbers surrounding him, their weapons raised uncertainly. I see everything so clearly now. The endless cycle of threats and responses. The inefficiency of our reactive approach. Ben, whatever you're thinking, we can help you, Max said, taking a careful step forward. We can remove the Omnitrix, find a way to remove it. Ben's expression hardened. No one will ever separate me from the Omnitrix again. It's part of me now. As it should be. With a gesture, the temporal vortex expanded, enveloping Ben in swirling energy. I need time to complete the integration, to understand the full extent of these new abilities. Don't worry, I'll be back soon. With solutions to problems you didn't even know existed. Ben, wait. Gwen called, generating mana discs beneath her feet to launch toward him. Don't do this. But it was too late. The vortex collapsed in on itself, taking Ben with it and leaving behind only a faint residue of temporal energy. Kevin lowered his transformed arm slowly. So, that just happened. Azimuth, Max turned to the Galvan genius. What do we do now? The creator of the Omnitrix looked older than they'd ever seen him, the weight of cosmic responsibility heavy on his diminutive shoulders. Prepare, he said gravely. When Ben returns, he won't be the person you knew. The Nexus Protocol, combined with the temporal energy he absorbed from the Chronarch, the potential power is beyond calculation. But he's still Ben, Gwen insisted, though doubt tinged her voice. Some part of him has to remain. Perhaps, Azimuth conceded. But remember, the Nexus doesn't simply add alien consciousness to his own. It optimizes his thinking according to its definition of efficiency and purpose. The compassion, the doubt, the very human qualities that made Ben Tennyson worthy of the Omnitrix, they become calculated variables rather than emotional truths. So what are you saying? Kevin demanded. That Ben's gone for good? Azimuth's large eyes were solemn. I'm saying that when he returns, you must be prepared to face an enemy with all of Ben's knowledge, all of the Omnitrix's power, and none of his former moral constraints. The words hung in the air, a terrible prophecy that none of them wanted to believe. But deep down, Gwen knew Azimuth was right. She'd seen the change in Ben's eyes, not possession or mind control, but a fundamental shift in perspective that made him something other than the cousin she'd grown up with. Then we prepare, Max decided, his voice steady despite the pain evident in his eyes. And we hope that somewhere inside whatever he's becoming, Ben is still fighting. Ben Tennyson returned 3 weeks later. Not with an army or a weapon or any of the dramatic entrances his old self might have chosen. He simply walked into Bellwood City Hall during a public meeting and announced his new vision for humanity's future. The recording had gone viral before the authorities could contain it. Ben, transformed into his new armored form, calmly explaining how he would be implementing necessary evolutionary guidance for Earth's benefit. How resistance would be met with firm but fair consequences. How humanity's chaotic, self-destructive tendencies required correction from a higher intelligence. Within days, Bellwood was under his control. Not through violence or conquest, but through a combination of technological superiority, public support from those who still saw him as Earth's greatest hero, and strategic incapacitation of those who opposed him. The plumbers attempted intervention, only to discover their advanced technology rendered useless by fields of disrupting energy that Ben could now generate at will. Earth's governments mobilized military responses, which Ben neutralized with humiliating ease, transmuting weapons into harmless objects and returning soldiers to their bases unharmed but demoralized. When the first volunteers stepped forward to become DN aliens, humans enhanced with spliced alien DNA through Ben's modified Omnitrix technology, the Resistance realized how persuasive his vision had become. People willingly surrendered their humanity for the promise of evolutionary advancement, believing Ben's assurances that they were participating in the next stage of human development. Gwen, Kevin, and Max had formed the core of the Resistance, gathering those who recognized the true nature of Ben's transformation. They'd been joined by unlikely allies, former enemies who feared Ben's new power more than they hated his former heroic self. Dr. Onimo, the Forever Knights, even Vilgax had reached out, offering temporary alliances against the greater threat. Most surprising had been Albedo, Ben's former enemy and Asmitha's disgraced assistant. With his intimate knowledge of the Omnitrix's systems, he had become invaluable to their efforts to develop countermeasures against Ben's evolving powers. But for every small victory they achieved, Ben seemed to grow stronger, his control expanding beyond Bellwood to encompass larger territories. His influence spread not just through force but through a kind of technological evangelism, promises of advancement, security, and purpose that resonated with a world grown weary of chaos. "We're here," Max announced, bringing Gwen back to the present as they approached a seemingly abandoned gas station on the outskirts of Olympia. "Everyone stay close." Max tapped a complex pattern on what appeared to be a defunct oil pump. A section of concrete beside the building slid away, revealing a staircase. "Descending underground. Quickly," he urged, ushering the refugees toward the entrance. "Kevin, take the rear. Gwen, help me get everyone settled once we're inside." The underground facility was a stark contrast to the decrepit building above, clean, well-lit, equipped with advanced technology that somehow functioned despite the dampening field. "Asmitha's shielding is holding," Gwen observed with relief as they sealed the entrance behind them. "For now," Max agreed. "But each time we use these safehouses, Ben's scanners get closer to detecting the energy signatures." The refugees were led to a communal area where resistance volunteers provided food, medical attention, and reassurance. Gwen watched the young boy from earlier sitting quietly beside his mother, his eyes wide as he took in the hidden base. "How many made it out this time?" asked a familiar voice. Gwen turned to see Rook Blanco approaching, the Ravanagander's feline features drawn with concern. His prototech armor was scratched and dented in several places, evidence of a recent confrontation. 17, Max answered. "Plus the three of us. We lost contact with you at the extraction point." "What happened?" Rook's expression darkened. "Ben's forces intercepted my team before we reached you. I was forced to create a diversion so the others could escape." "Others?" Kevin asked, joining them after securing the perimeter. "You found more survivors?" Rook nodded. "A group of plumbers who had been trapped in the Seattle containment zone since Ben established it last month. They had valuable intelligence." He glanced around. "Where is Magister Tennyson?" "The older one?" Gwen and Kevin exchanged confused looks. "What do you mean?" "He's right here," Gwen said, gesturing to her grandfather. Max frowned. "Rook, what are you talking about?" "I'm the only Magister Tennyson here." Rook's eyes widened with alarm. "But that's impossible. Magister Tennyson was with me at the rendezvous point. We separated when the DN aliens attacked." He activated his plumber badge, projecting a holomap. "He should have reached the extraction point before I did." A chill ran down Gwen's spine. "Rook, there was no one at the extraction point except us and the refugees. Grandpa never left my sight." Understanding dawned on all their faces simultaneously. "A shapeshifter," Max concluded grimly. "Ben planted a spy in your team." "Not a shapeshifter," came a new voice from the entrance to the communal area. "Just really good holographic tech." They spun to see the young boy from the refugee group standing alone, his mother nowhere in sight. Before they could react, his image shimmered and dissolved, replaced by a tall, slim figure with pale skin and red eyes. "Albedo," Gwen breathed, mana instantly flaring around her hands. Albedo raised his palms in a gesture of peace, though his trademark smirk remained firmly in place. "Easy, Anodite. If I wanted to betray you, I wouldn't have revealed myself. Where's the real boy? And his mother?" Max demanded, his blaster already aimed at Albedo's chest. "Safe," Albedo replied dismissively. "I intercepted them before they reached your extraction point and redirected them to another safe house." The woman was quite understanding when I explained the situation. "Which is what, exactly?" Kevin growled, his skin transforming to metal absorbed from a nearby console. Albedo's smirk faded, replaced by an uncharacteristically serious expression. Ben has found Azimuth. The real Azimuth, not the decoy we've been communicating with. He's being held in a facility outside of what used to be Portland. Gwen felt her heart sink. How? Azimuth was hidden on a pocket dimension fragment, completely off-grid. Apparently not completely, Albedo corrected. My former mentor may be brilliant, but he underestimated what Ben has become. The Galvan resistance team transporting him was intercepted 2 days ago. He paused, his red eyes darkening. None survived except Azimuth himself. Max lowered his blaster slightly, though he kept it ready. Why tell us this? What's your angle? Albedo? My angle, as you so eloquently put it, is survival, Albedo snapped. If Ben forces Azimuth to unlock the remaining Omnitrix safeguards, his power becomes virtually limitless. Even the countermeasures we've been developing will be useless. And you expect us to, what? Launch a rescue mission? Kevin asked incredulously. Against one of Ben's primary facilities? That's suicide. Not necessarily, Albedo countered. I've acquired the facility's schematics from one of my contacts. There are vulnerabilities we can exploit. Temporary blind spots in the security system. Even if we could get in, Gwen argued, Ben would sense us immediately. His connection to the Omnitrix gives him awareness of everything within his territory. Albedo's smirk returned. Not everything. I've been working on something, a device that temporarily masks our genetic signatures from the Omnitrix's scanners. It's not perfect, but it should give us enough time to extract Azimuth before Ben realizes we're there. Rook studied the pale duplicate of Ben skeptically. This plan seems remarkably convenient. Why would you risk your own safety to rescue Azimuth? You have been enemies for years. Enemy is such a strong word, Albedo demurred. We had professional differences. But Azimuth is still the greatest Galvan intellect in 5 galaxies. If anyone can develop a permanent solution to the Ben problem, it's him. Max exchanged glances with the others, silently evaluating the proposal. Let's say we believe you. How many people would this mission require? A small team, Albedo answered promptly. 4, maybe 5 at most. Enough to handle security but not so many that we can't move quickly and quietly. And your masking device, Gwen pressed. It's been field tested. Albedo's hesitation was brief but noticeable. Theoretically sound, but this would be its first operational deployment. Great, Kevin muttered. So not only are we walking into one of Ben's strongholds, we're doing it with untested tech. Unless you have a better option. Albedo challenged. Because by my calculations, Ben will break Azimuth within 72 hours. After that, it won't matter what plans you have. The resistance leaders fell silent, the weight of the decision hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Max spoke. Rook, verify Albedo's intelligence with any sources we still have near Portland. Gwen, contact our allies, see if anyone has additional information about this facility. Kevin, prep the stealth ship. He turned to Albedo. You'll remain under guard while we corroborate your story. Albedo gave a mock bow. As you wish, Magister. But don't take too long. The countdown has already begun. 12 hours later, a sleek black ship skimmed just above the treetops of what had once been Mount Hood National Forest. Its exterior absorbed light rather than reflecting it, rendering it nearly invisible against the night sky. Inside, 5 figures studied holographic displays showing their target, a massive structure built into the side of a mountain, pulsing with green energy that formed a dome over the entire facility. Dampening field at full strength, Rook reported from the pilot's seat. All communications will be blocked once we enter. Meaning we're completely on our own, Kevin added from the co-pilot position. He wore his plumber armor, modified with technology salvaged from a dozen alien sources. Remind me why we thought this was a good idea. Because we're running out of options, Gwen replied, adjusting the sleeves of her lucky girl outfit, now enhanced with protective spellwork. If Ben gets what he wants from Azimuth. He won't, Max assured her, checking his modified blaster one last time. The weapon had been specifically designed to counteract Ben's energy fields, though it remained untested in actual combat. We get in, find Azimuth, get out. No confrontations unless absolutely necessary. Albedo, secured in a seat behind them, rolled his red eyes. Yes, because stealth missions always go exactly according to plan when the Tennysons are involved. Max turned to glare at him. You're only here because we need your device to work. Don't make me regret bringing you along. Albedo raised his cuffed hands in mock surrender. The metallic bands around his wrists weren't just restraints, they were power dampeners, ensuring he couldn't access the limited transformation abilities he'd regained since his last encounter with Ben. There, Rook indicated a section of the energy dome. The maintenance access point you identified. If your intelligence is correct, it will cycle offline for approximately 30 seconds during the power redistribution. And if it's not correct? Kevin asked pointedly. Albedo smiled thinly. Then we'll make a spectacular light show when we crash into the barrier. The ship descended toward the designated point, hovering just outside the green energy field. Seconds ticked by in tense silence, all eyes fixed on the pulsing dome. Power fluctuation detected, Rook announced. Preparing for insertion in 3, 2, 1. The section of the energy dome flickered, then briefly vanished. Rook gunned the engines, sending the ship darting through the gap moments before it resealed behind them. We're in, Gwen breathed, scanning the area with her mana-enhanced senses. And so far, no alarms. Activate the masking device, Max ordered Albedo. Now. Albedo nodded, using his cuffed hands to manipulate a small device attached to his belt. It hummed to life, projecting a subtle field that enveloped the ship. Online. We have approximately 40 minutes before the power cells deplete. I suggest we don't waste time. Rook guided the ship toward a maintenance hangar on the facility's lower level, using terrain features to mask their approach. The structure loomed larger as they drew closer, a massive complex of interlocking buildings with the architectural style Ben had adopted for all his installations, sleek, angular, with glowing green lines tracing patterns that seemed to serve both aesthetic and functional purposes. I'm detecting unusual energy readings from the central spire, Rook noted, indicating a tower that rose from the center of the facility. Consistent with Galvan containment technology. That's where they're holding Azimuth, Albedo confirmed. The spire contains a special chamber designed to neutralize Galvan intellectual capabilities. It's not pleasant. For once, his voice held no trace of sarcasm or superiority. How do you know about this technology? Max asked suspiciously. Albedo's expression darkened. Because I helped design it, back when I was still Azimuth's assistant. Before everything. It was meant to contain dangerous Galvan criminals, not. He trailed off, seeming genuinely disturbed by the memory. Gwen studied him carefully. You actually care what happens to him, don't you? Don't be ridiculous, Albedo snapped, his usual demeanor returning. I simply recognize that his intellect is our best hope against Ben. Nothing more. The ship settled into the shadows of the maintenance hangar, powering down to minimal systems. Outside, DN aliens moved with mechanical precision, performing tasks with single-minded focus. Unlike the original DN aliens created by the hybrid years ago, these were fully conscious, willing converts to Ben's cause. Disgusting, Kevin muttered as they watched a group of the transformed humans unloading equipment. Hard to believe people volunteer for that. Is it? Albedo countered quietly. Humans have always sought transcendence, through religion, technology, even drugs. Ben merely offers a tangible, immediate version. Evolution without the weight. It's not evolution, Gwen argued. It's corruption. He's changing what makes us human. Perhaps, Albedo conceded. But from his perspective, from the perspective of the composite consciousness he's become, humanity's current form is inefficient, limited, self-destructive. He genuinely believes he's improving your species. That's not his decision to make, Max said firmly, ending the philosophical debate. Rook, what's our best approach to the central spire? Rook highlighted a path on the holographic display. This maintenance tunnel leads to the lower levels of the central building. From there, we can access the service elevators to the spire. According to the schematics Albedo provided, security is lightest along this route. DN aliens? Kevin asked. Minimal, Rook confirmed. Most are assigned to the perimeter or the research sectors. The inner areas rely more on automated systems, which will be partially neutralized by our genetic masking, Albedo added. The facility's security is built around the Omnitrix's ability to detect and identify lifeforms. If we can fool that system, we bypass most of their defenses. Max nodded decisively. We move in 5 minutes. Final equipment check now. As they prepared for the infiltration, Gwen found herself drawn to a viewpoint overlooking the main courtyard of the facility. From their hidden position, she could see dozens of humans entering a large structure adjacent to the central spire. They moved with eager purpose, many carrying personal belongings, like travelers embarking on a journey. The Transformation Center, Albedo explained, coming to stand beside her. Where ordinary humans become DN aliens. That building processes over 100 volunteers daily. Why? Gwen whispered, unable to comprehend the willingness to surrender one's humanity. Why would so many people choose this? Albedo studied the scene with clinical detachment. Security. Purpose. Enhancement. Ben doesn't force the transformation on anyone, that would contradict his vision of guided evolution. Instead, he creates conditions where it seems like the rational choice. What conditions? Resources flow to his territories. Technology functions better within his domain. Crime is virtually non-existent. Meanwhile, areas that resist him experience difficulties. Power outages. Communication disruptions. Food shortages that are never quite severe enough to qualify as humanitarian crises but make daily life increasingly challenging. Gwen felt sick. He's manipulating them. Of course, Albedo agreed. But with the lightest possible touch. People believe they're making a free choice, which makes the choice itself more meaningful to them. More permanent. He turned to face her directly. That's what makes him truly dangerous. Not the power, but the strategy. The patience. Very unlike the Ben Tennyson I once knew. We're moving, Max called softly from the ship's ramp. Masks on. They donned specialized face coverings that Albedo had designed to complement the genetic masking device, further confusing the facility's identification systems. Rook led the way, his Ravanagander agility and stealth training making him the natural point man. The maintenance tunnel was narrow and dimly lit, forcing them to move in single file. Kevin took the rear, his enhanced plumber armor allowing him to detect any pursuers. Between them, Gwen maintained a low-level mana field, ready to expand it into shields at the first sign of danger. Approaching junction point, Rook whispered after several minutes of tense progress. 2 DN aliens ahead, performing maintenance. Can we go around? Max asked. Rook shook his head. Not without backtracking significantly. I've got this, Kevin murmured, moving past the others to join Rook at the front. He produced a small device from his armor, a neural disruptor calibrated specifically for the hybrid nervous systems of DN aliens. Quick and quiet. Rook nodded, and together they moved forward. The confrontation lasted seconds, 2 soft thuds, and then Kevin's whispered all clear. The team advanced to find the DN aliens unconscious but unharmed, neatly positioned to appear as if they'd simply fallen asleep during their shift. Nice work, Max approved as they continued past. How long until they wake up? About an hour, Kevin replied. The disruptor is designed to mimic natural sleep patterns. Even if someone finds them, they'll just assume they dozed off. They reached the service elevator without further incident, Albedo's genetic masking technology working exactly as promised. The automated security scanners registered them as authorized maintenance personnel, granting access without question. Too easy, Gwen murmured as the elevator began its ascent toward the spire. Something doesn't feel right. Ben's overconfidence, Albedo suggested. He believes his technology infallible, his domain impenetrable. Why waste resources on redundant security when the Omnitrix itself serves as the perfect detection system? Or it's a trap, Kevin countered grimly. If Ben knew we were here, we'd already be contained, Max reasoned. His approach has always been preemptive rather than reactive. The elevator slowed, then stopped. The doors opened to reveal a sterile corridor pulsing with the same green energy that permeated the entire facility. Unlike the lower levels, this area was eerily silent, devoid of personnel. The containment section, Albedo whispered. Azimuth should be in the high-security chamber at the end of this hallway. They moved forward cautiously, the sense of wrongness growing stronger with each step. The corridor seemed to stretch longer than it should have, creating a disorienting effect that made distance difficult to judge. Spatial distortion, Gwen realized aloud. The hallway exists in partially folded space. It's bigger on the inside. Galvan technology, Albedo confirmed. Specifically, technology Azimuth developed for his null void projectors, repurposed to create a more secure containment environment. At the end of the impossibly long corridor, they found a door unlike any other in the facility, not the sleek, modern design that characterized Ben's architecture, but something that appeared ancient, almost archaic. Symbols covered its surface, glowing faintly with an energy that wasn't the omnipresent green of the Omnitrix. That's not Ben's tech, Kevin observed, studying the door warily. No, Albedo agreed, a note of surprise in his voice. It's Chronarch technology. Ben must have adapted it from his encounter with them. Can you open it? Max asked. Albedo approached the door cautiously. Perhaps. The symbols follow a pattern similar to temporal lock mechanisms I've studied. If I can identify the correct sequence. As he reached toward the door, the symbols suddenly flared brighter. The entire corridor pulsed with energy, and a voice spoke from all around them, not from any visible speaker, but as if the very air carried the words. I was wondering when you'd arrive. Gwen's blood ran cold. She knew that voice, similar to Ben's but layered with harmonics that no human vocal cords could produce. The composite consciousness. That her cousin had become. Defensive positions. Max ordered, raising his modified blaster. Albedo, get that door open now. The pale Galvan worked frantically at the symbols while the others formed a protective circle around him. The corridor rippled, reality itself seeming to flex and distort. The masking device failed, Rook stated the obvious, his proto-tool configured to combat mode. But how? It should have lasted at least 20 more minutes. It didn't fail, came the voice again, this time accompanied by a figure materializing at the far end of the corridor. Ben stood there, or rather, the being that Ben had become. His armored form seemed to absorb the light around it, the green circuitry patterns pulsing in time with the facility's energy. It was quite impressive, actually. I simply chose to see through it. Ben, Gwen called out, mana shields forming around her hands. We don't want to fight you. We just want Azimuth. I know, Ben replied, his tone almost conversational as he began walking toward them. Each step he took seemed to bend space slightly, making the distance between them uncertain. That's why I arranged for you to find him. Kevin blinked in confusion. What? The intelligence Albedo received, Ben continued, still approaching at that measured, disorienting pace. The security blind spot. The maintenance access point. Did you really think you discovered those by chance? Max's expression hardened. You wanted us to come here. Of course, Grandpa, Ben confirmed with a smile that didn't reach his glowing green eyes. Family reunions are so rare these days. With you all so busy running your little resistance, and me occupied with guiding human evolution, we hardly get to see each other. Stop with the games, Tennyson, Kevin growled, his armor morphing to combat configuration. What do you want? Ben halted, still keeping that unnerving, uncertain distance. The same thing I've always wanted. To protect the people I care about. To make the world, the universe, a better place. His expression softened slightly, a glimpse of the old Ben visible beneath the composite consciousness. To bring you all home. This isn't home, Gwen countered fiercely. These transformation centers, these DN aliens, this guided evolution, it's not protection, Ben. It's control. Is it? Ben asked, seeming genuinely curious about her perspective. Humans lived in fear before, fear of alien invasions, fear of each other, fear of their own destructive tendencies. I've eliminated those fears. Created safety, stability, purpose. By taking away choice, Max argued. By deciding for everyone what their future should be. Ben tilted his head, the gesture somehow more alien than human despite his mostly unchanged facial features. Choice is overrated when the options are so poor. Humanity was on a collision course with extinction, through climate disaster, through warfare, through a dozen other self-inflicted wounds. I've altered that course. Got it. Albedo exclaimed suddenly as the ancient door began to creak open behind them. Ben didn't seem concerned. Go ahead. See for yourselves. Rook kept his proto-tool trained on Ben while the others glanced quickly through the opening door. Inside was a chamber bathed in soft blue light, so different from the green energy that dominated the rest of the facility. At its center, suspended in what appeared to be a force field, was azimuth, or what they initially took to be azimuth. That's not. Albedo began, his voice failing as realization struck. Not azimuth, Ben confirmed. A projection. The real azimuth is exactly where he's always been, hidden away on Galvan Prime, protected by defenses I could breach but choose not to out of respect for my former mentor. This was all a setup, Kevin realized aloud. To get us here. Not just to get you here, Ben corrected. To talk. To show you what I'm building. To give you the opportunity to stop fighting against the inevitable and help shape it instead. He gestured, and the walls of the corridor became transparent, revealing the vast facility beyond, laboratories where scientists worked on new technologies, training centers where humans learned to use their new DN alien abilities, medical facilities where the transformations took place. This isn't a prison, Ben continued. It's the future. Humanity evolving beyond its limitations, guided by intelligence capable of seeing the bigger picture. Your intelligence, Gwen noted skeptically. The composite consciousness I've become, Ben acknowledged. Part human, part Omnitrix, part Chronarch. Something new, something better equipped to guide evolution than blind natural selection or chaotic human choice. Max stepped forward, lowering his weapon slightly. Ben, listen to yourself. This isn't you talking. The Nexus Protocol, the Chronarch influence, they've changed how you think, how you see the world. Of course they have, Ben agreed readily. That's the point, Grandpa. I needed to change. We all do. He spread his arms, encompassing the facility beyond the transparent walls. Everything I've built is designed around one principle, guided, consensual evolution. No one is forced. Everyone chooses. After you manipulate the conditions to make that choice inevitable, Gwen challenged. Ben's expression hardened slightly. I create incentives, yes. But the choice remains theirs. Enough of this, Albedo interrupted impatiently. If azimuth isn't here, then this entire mission was pointless. Not pointless, Ben corrected. An opportunity. For all of you. He looked at each of them in turn, his gaze lingering longest on Gwen. Join me. Help me shape this new world. Your resistance can't win, you know that. But you could help ensure that what I'm building truly serves humanity's best interests. For a moment, silence fell over the corridor. The offer hung in the air, tempting in its apparent reasonableness. Ben wasn't threatening them, wasn't demanding surrender. He was offering partnership. And if we refuse? Max finally asked, his voice steady. Ben sighed, a surprisingly human gesture. Then you leave. Return to your resistance. Continue fighting a battle you can't win against an enemy who doesn't want to destroy you. He stepped aside, clearing the path back to the elevator. I won't stop you. The genetic masking technology is impressive. With refinement, it might even work long enough to get you back to your ship. Kevin scoffed. Just like that? You're letting us walk out. Why not? Ben shrugged. You came for Azimuth, who isn't here. I offered an alternative, which you're free to refuse. Violence would serve no purpose. Gwen studied her cousin intently, searching for deception in his too calm features. What's the catch, Ben? No catch, he assured her. Just a request, take these with you. He gestured, and a section of the wall slid open to reveal a rack of small devices, similar to portable hard drives. Data packets. Information on what I'm actually doing here, not the propaganda your resistance has constructed. Propaganda? Rook questioned. You believe I'm creating an army, Ben explained. That the DN aliens are slaves, that I'm preparing for some grand conquest. The truth is far more benign. See for yourselves. Max hesitated, then nodded to Kevin, who cautiously retrieved one of the devices. We'll examine it. I make no promises beyond that. That's all I ask, Ben said with apparent sincerity. Knowledge before judgment. The resistance team began backing toward the elevator, weapons still at the ready despite Ben's peaceful stance. Gwen maintained eye contact with her cousin, troubled by the calmness she saw there, not the serenity of peace but the stillness of absolute certainty. This isn't over, Ben, she said softly. I know, he acknowledged. But maybe it could be something other than a fight. Think about it, Gwen. All of you. His gaze swept across the group one final time. Family shouldn't be on opposite sides. The elevator doors closed between them, and Gwen felt her shoulders sag with relief and confusion. The descent seemed to take forever, each team member lost in their own thoughts. It was too easy, Kevin finally said as the elevator neared the lower levels. He let us walk right out. Because this wasn't about capturing us, Max replied, studying the data device they'd taken. It was about planting doubt. Dividing us with reasonable-sounding arguments. Are we certain they are merely arguments? Rook asked quietly. What if there is truth to his claim that we have misunderstood his intentions? Albedo snorted derisively. Please. I've known Ben Tennyson in multiple incarnations, and this version is by far the most dangerous precisely because he believes his own propaganda. The composite consciousness genuinely sees itself as humanity's savior, making its actions all the more insidious. They reached the maintenance tunnel without incident, retracing their steps toward the hangar where they'd left their ship. True to Ben's word, no alarms sounded, no DN aliens intercepted them. The genetic masking device, which Albedo had reactivated, seemed to be functioning perfectly again. He could have captured us if he wanted to, Gwen said as they approached the ship. Why didn't he? Because prisoners require resources, Max answered grimly. This way, we return to the resistance carrying his message, his data, his doubts. We become his vectors. They boarded the ship in tense silence. Rook began the pre-flight sequence while Kevin secured Albedo, whose expression had grown increasingly troubled throughout their escape. Something's wrong, the pale Galvan finally said as the ship lifted off. This was too perfectly orchestrated, even for Ben. What do you mean? Gwen asked. The timing. The access. The convenient absence of security. The staged revelation about azimuth. Albedo's red eyes narrowed in concentration. It's as if he knew exactly when and how we would arrive, exactly what we would do. He's got the Omnitrix and Chronarch technology, Kevin pointed out. Maybe he can see the future now. Not the future, Albedo corrected slowly, a dawning horror in his voice. The past. Our past. Our planning. He turned to Max suddenly. The safe house in Olympia, how long has it been since you last swept it for surveillance technology? Max's eyes widened with realization. 3 weeks. With everything happening, we need to scan this ship, Albedo interrupted urgently. Now. Rook activated the ship's internal security protocols, running a comprehensive scan of every system and surface. The results appeared on the main display almost immediately, a small device embedded in the ship's communication array, so seamlessly integrated it appeared to be part of the original design. It's not just surveillance, Rook reported, his voice tight with concern. It's a quantum entanglement transmitter. Everything we've said, everything we've done since boarding this ship has been transmitted directly to Ben's systems. Shut it down. Max ordered. Wait, Albedo countered. If we disable it suddenly, Ben will know we found it. Better to let it continue transmitting controlled information while we sweep for others. Kevin scowled. Others? You think there's more? I think, Albedo said carefully, that if Ben managed to plant one device on your supposedly secure ship, he's likely planted others throughout your resistance network. Possibly weeks or months ago. The implication sank in like a stone. If Ben had been monitoring their communications, their planning sessions, their strategy meetings. He knows everything, Gwen whispered. All our safe houses, all our allies, all our contingency plans. Which raises the question, Max said grimly, why hasn't he moved against us already? Because we're not a threat to him, Albedo concluded. We're a control group. A way for him to measure the effectiveness of his methods against those who actively resist them. His red eyes glittered with a mix of fear and reluctant admiration. It's what I would do in his position. Create a contained opposition to test responses, refine approaches, identify weaknesses in the system. The ship cleared the energy dome through another conveniently timed gap in the barrier, exactly as they'd entered. No pursuit, no complications. Perfect escape from a perfect trap that wasn't meant to catch them at all. Where to now? Rook asked quietly from the pilot's seat. We cannot return to any known resistance location if we assume they are compromised. Max stared at the data device Ben had given them, turning it over in his hands. We need a clean environment. Somewhere Ben hasn't had access to. Somewhere to regroup and reassess. I might know a place, Gwen said slowly. Remember Michael Morningstar? Kevin groaned. Dark Star? That energy vampire creep who tried to drain your powers? What about him? Before he went full villain, he maintained a research facility in the New Mexico desert. It was designed to be completely isolated from external energy fields, magic, technology, everything. He was paranoid about other energy manipulators spying on his work. And you think it's still operational? Max asked skeptically. Gwen nodded. Last intelligence report had him imprisoned off-world by the plumbers. The facility should be abandoned but intact. Most importantly, it's completely shielded from the kind of surveillance Ben would use. Max considered this, then nodded decisively. Set course for New Mexico, Rook. We'll maintain calm silence and operate under the assumption that Ben is listening to everything until proven otherwise. As the ship changed direction, heading south toward the desert, Gwen found herself staring at the data device. What truth or lies did it contain? What was Ben really trying to tell them? And more disturbing still, if he could have crushed their resistance at any time, why had he chosen not to? The questions haunted her as the ship sped through the night, carrying them toward an uncertain refuge and an even more uncertain future. Within his central facility, Ben Tennyson stood before a wall of holographic displays, each showing different aspects of his expanding domain. Cities adapting to his new technologies, volunteers entering transformation centers, aliens constructing infrastructure designed to last centuries rather than decades. Progress, by any objective measure. Evolution guided by intelligence rather than chance. Order replacing chaos. So why did doubt persist at the edges of his consciousness? The composite intelligence that he had become processed information with perfect efficiency, integrating data from thousands of sources simultaneously. It saw patterns humans could never perceive, calculated outcomes with precision no individual mind could match. Yet whenever he encountered his former family, something shifted within that perfect system. A variable that didn't fit the equations. Emotional attachments, he murmured to himself, the harmonics in his voice reverberating through the empty chamber. Still influencing optimal decision-making. A display activated, showing the resistance ship heading south toward New Mexico. The quantum entanglement transmitter was performing perfectly, relaying every word spoken aboard. He'd allow them their illusion of security for now. The Dark Star facility would indeed shield them temporarily, but it served his purposes to let them believe they'd found true sanctuary. Another display showed the data device they'd taken, identical to the others he'd offered, containing carefully selected information about his operations. Not lies, but not the complete truth either. Just enough to create uncertainty, to plant seeds of doubt about the Resistance's understanding of his goals. Ben turned away from the displays, focusing instead on a three-dimensional model rotating in the center of the room, a representation of the next phase of his plan. The structure was massive, reaching from Earth's surface into the upper atmosphere, pulsing with the same green energy that characterized all his technology. The Ascension Tower, he said, studying the model with satisfaction. Humanity's next evolutionary step. A third display activated, showing a laboratory deep within the facility. Scientists, both human and alien, worked on a crystalline device that resembled the Omnitrix symbol but on a much larger scale. The technology was beyond anything Earth had seen before, incorporating elements from dozens of alien species along with chronic temporal mechanics. This was his true purpose, not merely guiding human evolution through incremental alien transformations, but creating a quantum leap forward. A transformation that would elevate the entire species simultaneously, connecting every mind on the planet to a network of shared consciousness while maintaining individual identity. Evolution without loss of self. Unity without uniformity. Order without tyranny. At least, that was the theory. The composite consciousness had calculated a 94.8% probability of success, with minimal negative outcomes. Those weren't perfect odds, but they were better than the alternative, humanity's slow self-destruction through conflict, resource depletion, and environmental collapse. Yet doubt remained. Not from the Omnitrix component of his consciousness, nor from the chronic elements he'd absorbed. The doubt came from the part that was still Ben Tennyson, the human core that had once defined his entire being and now existed as just one component of a greater whole. That core still cared about Gwen, about Kevin, about Grandpa Max. Still valued their approval, their understanding. Still hoped they would eventually see the necessity of his actions. Sentiment, Ben murmured, the word carrying both dismissal and acceptance. A weakness. But perhaps also a strength. The Resistance served multiple purposes in his grand design. A testing ground for his methods, yes, but also a check against potential flaws in his thinking. If Gwen and the others could find genuine ethical failings in his approach, not merely emotional objections but substantive issues he'd overlooked, their resistance might actually improve the final outcome. And if they couldn't, if they eventually recognized the necessity of his plan, their willing participation would be infinitely more valuable than their forced compliance. Ben turned back to the displays, watching his cousin's ship vanish into the New Mexico desert. Let them have their temporary sanctuary. Let them study the data he'd provided. Let them debate and argue and search for alternatives. In the end, they would understand. They had to. The timeline he'd glimpsed through the Chronarcha's consciousness left no other option. Evolution or extinction. Those were humanity's choices. And Ben Tennyson, or the being he had become, had simply removed the possibility of choosing wrong. The Ascension Tower would be completed in 3 months. After that, humanity's transformation would be irreversible. The Resistance had until then to either stop him or join him. Ben smiled, the expression nearly human despite the glowing green eyes. "Game on, cousin," he whispered. "Show me what you've got." Chapter 3, Reckoning. The New Mexico desert stretched endlessly under the merciless sun, heat waves distorting the horizon into shimmering mirages. In the shadow of a mesa, barely visible even from above, sat the abandoned research facility once belonging to Michael Morningstar. Its exterior had weathered to match the surrounding landscape, camouflaged by years of neglect and the relentless desert elements. Inside, however, was a different story. 3 weeks, Kevin announced, slamming his fist against the holographic display table. "We've been hiding here for 3 weeks while Ben builds that thing." The thing in question rotated slowly above the table, a massive tower stretching from Earth's surface to the upper atmosphere, constructed of materials that defied conventional analysis. The Ascension Tower, Ben had called it in communications they'd intercepted. The next phase of his plan for humanity. "We're not hiding," Max corrected firmly, though the strain of recent weeks showed clearly on his weathered face. "We're regrouping. Rebuilding. There's a difference." The Resistance had been forced to start nearly from scratch after discovering the extent of Ben's surveillance. Safe houses abandoned, communication networks dismantled, allies contacted through increasingly convoluted means to avoid detection. Only those in this room could be absolutely trusted, everyone else was a potential security risk. Gwen sat cross-legged in the corner of the command center, eyes closed in meditation. Purple energy flickered around her form, occasionally stabilizing into runic patterns before dissipating again. She'd been pushing her anodite abilities to their limits, searching for a way to counter Ben's growing power. "The tower will be operational in 4 days," Rook reported, analyzing the latest data they'd gathered through risky reconnaissance missions. "Construction is proceeding more rapidly than anticipated. And we still don't know what it does," Kevin growled in frustration. "Not really. They had theories, of course." The data device Ben had given them, thoroughly scanned for tracking technology before being accessed, contained schematics, energy projections, and a philosophical justification for the tower's construction. According to those files, the Ascension Tower would create a unified consciousness field connecting all of humanity while preserving individual identity. Evolution without loss of self, Ben had called it. Unity without uniformity. Albedo, who had reluctantly become their primary technical advisor, had a different interpretation. Mass consciousness manipulation, the pale Galvin stated, not looking up from the complex calculations running on his terminal. "The tower will broadcast a signal that reconfigures human neural pathways to be more compatible with Ben's vision." "Mind control," Kevin translated bluntly. "Not exactly," Albedo corrected, his red eyes flicking toward the tower hologram with something like grudging admiration. "It's far more elegant than crude control. The signal won't override free will, it will restructure how humans perceive certain concepts. Cooperation versus competition. Collective welfare versus individual gain. Future benefit versus immediate reward. Changing how people think is still mind control," Kevin insisted. "Perhaps," Albedo conceded. "But Ben wouldn't see it that way. The composite consciousness believes it's offering enlightenment, not enforcing compliance. In its view, this is liberation from humanity's evolutionary limitations." Gwen's eyes snapped open, the purple energy around her flaring brightly before settling into a steady aura. "It doesn't matter what he calls it," she said, her voice echoing slightly with power. "We can't let it happen." They all turned toward her, startled by the sudden intensity of her presence. Something had changed during her meditation, the energy surrounding her felt different, more focused, more alien. "Gwen." Max approached his granddaughter cautiously. "What have you done?" She stood, purple light flowing around her body like liquid. "What I had to do, Grandpa. I've made contact with my Anodite heritage, the full connection this time, not just glimpses." Kevin stepped toward her, alarm evident on his face. "You said that was dangerous. That you could lose yourself, your humanity." "That was before," Gwen replied, her eyes now glowing solid purple. "Before Ben started building a tower that will change what humanity means. Sometimes you have to risk everything to save what matters." The implications settled heavily over the room. Gwen had always limited her connection to her Anodite powers, fearing the alien energy would eventually overwhelm her human side. That she was willing to risk this now spoke volumes about their desperation. "Gwendolyn," Rook said carefully, "are you certain this is wise? Your cousin's transformation began similarly, embracing power that ultimately changed his fundamental nature." A flicker of something, doubt, determination, crossed Gwen's luminous face. "The difference is, I know the risk. I'm choosing this with eyes open, not being manipulated by chronic technology." She turned to Max, "And I have all of you to keep me grounded." Max studied his granddaughter for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "What did you learn during your meditation?" "I made contact with Verdona," Gwen replied, naming her Anodite grandmother who lived in the depths of space. "She's concerned about what's happening here. Not just for Earth, but for the greater cosmic balance." "The greater cosmic balance?" Kevin repeated skeptically. "Since when does your space grandma care about Earth politics?" "This isn't just Earth politics anymore," Gwen explained, the energy around her pulsing with her words. "Ben's tower, it's affecting more than just our planet. The energy signature it's generating has caught the attention of higher beings." Albedo's head snapped up from his calculations. "What kind of higher beings?" "Celestial sapiens," Gwen answered solemnly. "The same species as Alien X." A heavy silence fell over the room. Celestial sapiens were among the most powerful entities in the universe, reality-warping beings who normally remained in debate with themselves, rarely interfering in mortal affairs. "That's not good," Kevin finally said, master of understatement. "No, it's not," Gwen agreed. "According to Verdona, a faction of celestial sapiens has been monitoring the timeline disruptions caused by Ben's merging with the Chronic technology. They've reached a consensus that if the Ascension Tower activates, the resulting reality distortion will be too severe." "Too severe for what?" Max asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. "Too severe to allow this timeline to continue," Gwen confirmed grimly. "They're preparing to erase it. Not just Ben's tower, not just Earth, everything. Our entire reality, wiped clean as if it never existed." The implications were staggering. Extinction was one thing, a natural end to a species, a planet, even a civilization. But erasure from existence itself? The complete negation of everything they'd ever known, ever done, ever been? How long? Rook asked, practical even in the face of cosmic annihilation. "The moment the tower activates," Gwen replied. "Once the signal broadcasts, the celestial sapiens will act. We have 4 days to stop it." Kevin ran a hand through his dark hair. "No pressure or anything." "Actually," Albedo interjected, still studying his calculations, "it may be worse than that. Based on these energy readings, the tower is already affecting spacetime stability. The activation might be merely a formality, the damage could become irreversible before the actual broadcast begins." "Meaning?" Max prompted. "Meaning we may have less time than we think," Albedo clarified. "Hours rather than days." The room fell silent again as the full weight of their situation settled over them. Not just fighting to save humanity from Ben's vision of evolution, but racing to prevent the erasure of their entire reality. "We need a plan," Max finally said, his military training asserting itself in the face of crisis. "A direct assault on the tower?" "Suicide," Albedo dismissed immediately. Ben's security is impenetrable by conventional means. DN alien patrols, automated defense systems, and energy barriers that adapt to any attempted breach. Not to mention Ben himself, whose power continues to grow exponentially. What about unconventional means? Kevin suggested, a dangerous glint in his eye. I still have contacts in the less-than-legal tech community. If we can't break through his defenses, maybe we go around them. Under them. Something. Rook shook his head. Ben's awareness extends throughout his domain. Conventional or unconventional, he would detect our approach long before we reached the tower. Then we need a distraction, Max decided. Something big enough to focus his attention while a small team infiltrates the tower. And does what? Albedo challenged. Even if you reach the core, the technology is beyond anything your primitive tools could disable. We don't need to disable it, Gwen said suddenly, the energy around her flaring brighter. We need to redirect it. All eyes turned to her. Explain, Albedo demanded. Gwen stepped toward the holographic tower, her energy field interacting with the display to highlight specific components. The tower generates a field that affects consciousness, human consciousness, calibrated to Earth's specific evolutionary path. But what if we recalibrated it? Change the target? To what? Kevin asked. To Ben himself, Gwen answered. Turn his own technology against him. Use the tower to separate the composite consciousness back into its component parts, human, Omnitrix, Chronarch. Albedo's red eyes widened with sudden understanding. Theoretically possible. The tower's mechanisms are designed to restructure neural pathways. With the right modifications, it could potentially untangle the merged consciousness instead of replicating it. Would that kill him? Max asked quietly, the question hanging heavy in the air. No, Gwen assured him. It would free him. Return him to himself, like waking from a dream. She hesitated. At least, that's the theory. Some theory to bet the universe on, Kevin muttered, though there was no real opposition in his voice. After weeks of dead ends, even a dangerous plan was better than no plan at all. It's more than we had an hour ago, Max pointed out. Albedo, what would we need to recalibrate the tower? The pale Galvan considered this, fingers flying over his console. Access to the central control matrix. A comprehensive understanding of the calibration protocols. And he hesitated. A genetic sample from Ben. His original, unmodified human DNA. I have that, Gwen said immediately. From before all this started. I've kept samples from all of us, for emergency medical purposes. Kevin raised an eyebrow. You keep our DNA on file? That's not creepy at all. It saved your life twice, Gwen reminded him sharply. Remember the Norikian soul shifter? Fair point, Kevin conceded. So we have the DNA, Max summarized, bringing them back on track. Albedo can handle the technical aspects if we get him to the control matrix. That leaves the distraction and the infiltration team. I'll handle the distraction, Gwen declared, purple energy swirling more intensely around her. With my full anodite powers, I can create enough chaos to keep Ben occupied. Not alone, Kevin said firmly, stepping closer to her. I'm coming with you. Gwen started to protest, but Kevin cut her off. Don't even start. If you're going full anodite, someone needs to keep you grounded. Remind you why we're fighting. His expression softened. Besides, I've been working on something too. To demonstrate, he placed his hand on a nearby metal console. Instead of simply absorbing the material as he normally would, energy flowed into him, electrical, thermal, potential energy contained within the matter itself. His body began to glow with accumulated power. Kevin. Gwen gasped. You promised you wouldn't do this again. Energy absorption nearly killed you last time. Controlled absorption, he corrected, the glow fading as he released the energy back into the console. I've been practicing. Small amounts, building tolerance. I can handle it now. That's incredibly dangerous, Max warned, concern evident in his voice. So is letting Ben rewrite humanity and getting our reality erased by cosmic judges, Kevin countered bluntly. Desperate times, desperate measures. Rook stepped forward. Magister Tennyson and I will lead the infiltration team with Albedo. While Gwen and Kevin distract Ben, we will access the control matrix and implement the recalibration. Max nodded, the outline of a plan taking shape. We'll need transportation that can bypass Ben's security perimeter. Something his systems won't recognize. I might have a solution for that, came a new voice from the entrance to the command center. They turned to see a tall figure in tattered purple robes, leaning casually against the doorframe. His face was partially concealed by a hood, but the time traveler's pocket watch dangling from his hand was unmistakable. Professor Paradox, Gwen breathed. You're alive. More or less, Paradox replied with a thin smile, pushing back his hood to reveal a face that had aged considerably since they'd last seen him. His once dark hair was now streaked with white, and new lines etched his features. Time is relative, after all. Where have you been? Max demanded. We thought the Chronarchs had eliminated you from the timeline. They certainly tried, Paradox confirmed, limping slightly as he approached the holographic display. I've spent what you might call an eternity navigating the spaces between moments, avoiding their temporal tracers while searching for a way back to this critical juncture. Critical juncture, Kevin repeated. So you know about the tower? The Celestial Sapiens? Indeed. Paradox studied the hologram with a grim expression. The Ascension Tower represents a nexus point in multiple timelines. Its activation, or prevention, will determine far more than just Earth's fate. Can you help us? Gwen asked directly. Paradox sighed, suddenly looking every bit his apparent age. My abilities have been compromised by my encounter with the Chronarchs. My direct intervention is limited. He reached into his robes and withdrew a small device resembling an antique pocket watch. However, I can offer this, a temporal displacement generator. It will allow a small team to step sideways through time, bypassing Ben's security by essentially arriving before it was fully implemented. Albedo examined the device with professional curiosity. Fascinating. You're suggesting we travel back in time? Not exactly, Paradox corrected. Lateral time displacement, moving through parallel moments rather than backward or forward. You'll enter the tower through a temporal blind spot, existing slightly out of phase with the current timeline until you deactivate the device. And this will get us past Ben's awareness? Max clarified. Temporarily, Paradox confirmed. The composite consciousness has significant temporal sensitivity, but it's focused on forward projections and backward analysis. Lateral movement is its blind spot, a legacy of the Chronarch influence, ironically. They never consider sideways. Hope, tentative but real, began to spread through the room. For the first time in weeks, they had more than just desperation driving them, they had an actual plan with a genuine chance of success. How soon can we move? Max asked, already shifting into tactical planning mode. Immediately, Paradox replied gravely. As Albedo suspected, the timeline is already destabilizing. The Celestial Sapiens are gathering, reaching their final consensus. Once that happens. He let the implication hang. Then we go now, Gwen decided, the purple energy around her condensing into a more controlled aura. Kevin and I will create the distraction at the tower's eastern approach. Grandpa, you take Rook and Albedo through Paradox's temporal displacement to access the control matrix from the west. And when we succeed? Rook asked quietly. What happens to Ben? An uncomfortable silence fell over the group. They had discussed disabling the tower, separating Ben from the composite consciousness, but what came after? Would the Ben they knew still exist after everything that had happened? Would he face consequences for what he'd done? One problem at a time, Max finally said, his voice heavy with the weight of a grandfather forced to fight his own grandson. First, we save reality. Then we deal with what comes next. As they gathered equipment and made final preparations, Gwen found herself alone with Paradox for a moment. The time traveler watched her with an unreadable expression, his aged eyes seeming to look through her rather than at her. You have questions, he stated simply. Just one, Gwen replied, the anodite energy flickering around her fingers. Is there anything left of the real Ben? Or are we fighting something that just wears his face? Paradox was silent for a long moment, his expression troubled. Time is not a river but an ocean, he finally said. Waves and currents, depths and shallows. The being you call Ben now exists in the depths, where pressure transforms everything it touches. But even in the deepest trenches, light can still penetrate. That's not really an answer. It's the only one I can offer, Paradox replied sadly. The composite consciousness believes it is the ultimate evolution of Ben Tennyson, not a replacement but a fulfillment. Whether that's true or not, I suspect we'll all discover together. Before Gwen could press further, Kevin approached, carrying a backpack filled with equipment. Ready? He asked, his eyes searching hers with concern. She nodded, pushing aside her doubts. Whatever remained of her cousin, whether a spark or an ember or nothing at all, they had to try. For Ben, for humanity, for reality itself. Let's go save the world, she said. One last time. The Ascension Tower dominated the landscape, rising from the plains of what had once been northern Colorado like a monument to some alien god. Its surface gleamed with a metallic sheen that somehow absorbed and reflected light simultaneously, creating a visual distortion that made it difficult to focus on directly. Green energy pulsed upward along its exterior in rhythmic waves, each pulse sending ripples through the clouds gathering around its upper reaches. From their vantage point several miles away, Gwen and Kevin observed the tower through high-powered binoculars. DN alien patrols circled its base, moving with the mechanical precision that characterized all of Ben's forces. Hovering drones monitored the airspace, their sensors sweeping in predictable patterns. Security's even tighter than our intel suggested, Kevin noted, lowering the binoculars. Those new drones weren't in any of our reports. Ben's adapting, Gwen replied. He must suspect we're planning something. Kevin studied her, concern evident in his dark eyes. The purple energy that had surrounded her back at the base now seemed to flow beneath her skin, giving her a subtle luminescence that wasn't quite human. Her hair floated slightly, as if underwater, and her movements had acquired an uncanny grace. How are you feeling? He asked cautiously. With the whole anodite thing? Different, Gwen admitted. Like I'm seeing everything through two sets of eyes at once. Human perspective, anodite perspective. She flexed her fingers, watching mana energy spark between them. There's so much power, Kevin. It would be easy to get lost in it. Don't, he said simply, taking her hand. The spark of energy transferred to him briefly before dissipating. Remember what we're fighting for. Who we're fighting for. Gwen nodded, grateful for his grounding presence. Have you checked in with Grandpa's team? Kevin tapped his earpiece, which connected to a secure quantum frequency that, theoretically, Ben's technology couldn't intercept. Max? Status update. Max's voice came through, slightly distorted but clear enough, in position at the western approach. Paradox's device is charged and ready. We're waiting for your distraction before we activate. Understood, Kevin confirmed. T-5 minutes. Get ready. He disconnected and turned back to Gwen. It's time. She nodded, closing her eyes in concentration. The purple energy surrounding her intensified, becoming so bright that Kevin had to shield his eyes. When he looked again, Gwen's transformation had completed, her human form replaced by a being of pure anodite energy, humanoid but distinctly alien, her hair now tendrils of glowing mana that whipped around her luminous face. Gwen?" Kevin asked uncertainly, suddenly afraid that she'd already lost herself to the alien energy. "I'm still here," she assured him, her voice echoing with harmonics similar to Ben's but somehow warmer, more organic. "Just, more of me now." Kevin nodded, then placed both hands on the ground beneath them. Closing his eyes in concentration, he began to absorb energy, not just from the earth, but from the air, from the sunlight, from the ambient electrical fields that permeated everything. His body glowed increasingly bright as he stored more power than he'd ever attempted before. "Kevin," Gwen cautioned, concern evident even through her alien appearance. "Be careful. Don't take too much." Controlled absorption, he reminded her, though sweat beaded on his forehead from the effort of containing so much energy. "I've got this." When he stood, his body crackled with power, not transformed into any particular material as was his usual ability, but radiating pure energy that distorted the air around him. His eyes glowed with the same intensity, and when he spoke, his voice carried an electric undertone. "Let's do this," he said, clenching fists that now sparked with each movement. Together, they moved toward the tower, not trying to hide their approach, but broadcasting it. The distraction needed to be obvious, overwhelming, impossible for Ben to ignore. They didn't have to wait long for a response. Alarms blared across the facility, and DN alien patrols immediately converged on their position. Drones swooped down, energy weapons charging. "Attention intruders," came a mechanical voice from the lead drone. "You are entering a restricted evolutionary advancement zone. Surrender immediately for processing." "Processing this," Kevin replied, releasing a concentrated burst of energy that vaporized the drone instantly. The discharge was so powerful it created a momentary electromagnetic pulse, disrupting the other drones and causing them to falter midair. Gwen raised her hands, mana energy coalescing around her. "Remember, we need to make this big. Grandpa needs time to reach the control matrix." With that, she released a wave of purple energy that rippled across the landscape, uprooting trees and creating fissures in the earth as it approached the tower's perimeter. The energy collided with the facility's outer barrier, creating a spectacular light show as the two forces clashed. For a moment, the barrier held. Then, with a sound like shattering glass, it collapsed under the anodite power Gwen had unleashed. Alarms intensified as defensive protocols activated throughout the facility. "That should get his attention," Kevin observed, gathering more energy into his hands. "Let's keep it up." DN aliens swarmed toward them, firing energy weapons that would have incapacitated normal humans instantly. Kevin absorbed the blasts, adding their power to his own before redirecting it in devastating counterattacks that cleared entire squads at once. Gwen took to the air, her anodite form allowing her to fly with effortless grace. From above, she targeted the tower's external power conduits, disrupting the energy flow with precisely aimed mana blasts. Each hit caused the green pulses to falter momentarily, sending cascading failures through sections of the facility's systems. "Energy signatures approaching from the central hub," Kevin warned, checking a scanner attached to his wrist. "Big ones." I think we got his attention. As if in confirmation, the air before them shimmered, reality itself seeming to fold inward. From this distortion emerged a figure they recognized all too well, Ben, in his evolved form, the composite consciousness made manifest. The green circuitry patterns on his armor glowed more intensely than they'd seen before, and the Omnitrix symbol on his chest pulsed with power that visibly distorted the space around it. "Gwen. Kevin." Ben's voice carried that unnerving harmonic quality, somehow both familiar and alien simultaneously. "I expected the resistance to make a final stand. I didn't expect it to be family." Gwen descended to hover beside Kevin, her mana energy flaring defensively. "This ends today, Ben. One way or another." Ben tilted his head, studying them with those unervingly calm green eyes. "You've changed," he observed, gaze shifting between Gwen's anodite form and Kevin's energy-charged state. "Taking desperate measures. Embracing power you once feared." How interesting that in fighting what I've become, you transform yourselves in similar ways. We're nothing like you, Kevin snapped, energy crackling around his clenched fists. We're still us. Still human where it counts. Are you? Ben asked with what seemed like genuine curiosity. The Anodite consciousness is as alien to humanity as the Omnitrix's composite intelligence. And your energy absorption, Kevin, how human does that feel right now? The power surging through you, changing how you perceive reality. Gwen interrupted before Ben could continue his psychological probing. We didn't come to debate philosophy, Ben. We came to stop the tower. The Ascension Tower cannot be stopped, Ben stated with absolute certainty. It's already changing reality at a quantum level. The broadcast is merely formality, the culmination of processes already in motion. Then we'll destroy it, Kevin declared, gathering energy for a massive blast. Ben didn't move to stop him, which should have been their first warning. Kevin released the accumulated power in a focused beam that struck the tower's surface directly, only to watch in disbelief as the energy was absorbed completely, the green circuitry patterns briefly glowing brighter before returning to their normal pulse. The tower adapts, Ben explained calmly. It learns from each attack, integrating the energy, evolving its defenses. Just as I do. He spread his arms, encompassing the facility around them. Everything here is connected. Everything learns. Everything evolves. Gwen's eyes narrowed, purple energy intensifying around her. If we can't destroy it, we'll shut it down from the inside. Now Ben's expression changed, a flicker of what might have been concern crossing his features. There is no inside to access. The control systems are distributed throughout the structure, quantum-linked, self-repairing. He took a step toward them. Whatever plan you've developed based on outdated intelligence, it won't work. We'll see about that, Gwen replied, then launched into action. She unleashed a barrage of mana blasts, not at the tower but at Ben himself. The attacks came so quickly, from so many angles, that even the composite consciousness couldn't track them all. Several connected, pushing Ben backward and creating scorch marks on his armored form. Kevin joined the assault, channeling his absorbed energy into concentrated strikes that would have vaporized any normal opponent. Ben raised shields of green energy, blocking most of Kevin's attacks but clearly expending significant power to do so. Your abilities have indeed grown impressive, Ben acknowledged, genuine appreciation in his voice despite the conflict. In another context, I would welcome such evolution. Save it, Kevin growled, pressing his advantage with a series of rapid attacks. We're not interested in your approval. The battle intensified, powers clashing with increasing ferocity. Ben's capabilities seemed to expand with each exchange, new defenses manifesting, counterattacks growing more precise. But Gwen and Kevin were evolving too, their desperation driving them to push their newfound abilities beyond what they'd thought possible. Gwen created constructs of pure mana, massive hands that attempted to restrain Ben, barriers that divided the battlefield, weapons that struck from unexpected angles. Kevin absorbed and redirected energy with increasing skill, learning to modulate his attacks to penetrate Ben's adaptive defenses. Through it all, Ben remained unerringly composed, as if the battle were merely an interesting problem to solve rather than a desperate struggle. You're fighting so hard, he observed during a momentary lull, but have you considered what happens if you succeed? The tower has already begun restructuring reality at a quantum level. Deactivating it now could collapse local spacetime entirely. Better that than what you're planning, Gwen countered, though a flicker of doubt crossed her luminous features. Is it? Ben challenged. The collapse would begin here, spreading outward at light speed. Billions would die before it stabilized. Is that preferable to evolution? Stop calling it evolution. Kevin shouted, releasing another energy blast that Ben deflected with a casual gesture. It's control. It's making everyone think like you. Not like me, Ben corrected. Better than they currently do. Free from the evolutionary baggage that makes humans short-sighted, selfish, tribal. The tower doesn't create copies, it unlocks potential already present in human consciousness. The debate was cut short as the ground beneath them trembled violently. Green energy surged up the tower's length, more intense than the regular pulses they'd observed earlier. Initialization sequence, Ben murmured, momentarily distracted by the tower's activity. Ahead of schedule. That distraction was all Gwen needed. She connected with Kevin telepathically, a new ability her anodite form had unlocked, and coordinated a simultaneous attack from opposite directions. Ben blocked Kevin's frontal assault but missed Gwen's attack from behind, which struck with enough force to send him crashing into the tower's exterior. The sequence has begun, Ben announced as he recovered, his voice carrying a new urgency. I can't stop it now even if I wanted to. The tower has achieved self-regulation. Then we destroy it together, Gwen countered. You have the power, Ben. Help us shut it down before it's too late. For a moment, just a moment, something flickered in Ben's inhuman eyes. A hint of the person he had once been, considering her words. Then the composite consciousness reasserted control. It's already too late, he stated. Feel it, Gwen. The reality distortion. The celestial sapiens have reached consensus. Gwen extended her anodite senses and realized with horror that Ben was right. The fabric of reality itself seemed to be thinning around them, like tissue paper stretched to its breaking point. Above the tower, the sky had taken on an unnatural hue, not quite any color found in Earth's normal spectrum. They're coming, she whispered. They're going to erase everything. Not erase, Ben corrected. Replace. The tower will create a buffer, a transitional state between what was and what will be. Humanity will survive, evolved, better equipped for what comes next. Kevin looked between them in confusion, unable to sense the cosmic changes they were detecting. What's happening? Did Grandpa's team make it to the control matrix? As if in answer, their earpieces crackled to life. Max's voice came through, tense with urgency, we're in. Paradox's device got us through. Albedo is working on the recalibration, but we need more time. The system is fighting him. Ben tilted his head, as if listening to a conversation they couldn't hear. Ah. The temporal displacement. Clever. But ultimately futile. He raised a hand toward the tower, green energy connecting him to its systems. I've located them. Western Quadrant, Level 94, Control Node C. No. Gwen shouted, launching herself at Ben with everything she had. The collision created a shockwave that shattered windows throughout the facility and knocked Kevin off his feet. Ben and Gwen grappled midair, purple and green energies clashing violently. The composite consciousness was stronger, but Gwen's anodite form was more fluid, more adaptable in the moment. You don't understand what you're fighting against, Ben told her, his voice strained for the first time. The tower is humanity's only hope against what's coming. What's coming is happening because of you. Gwen countered, mana energy wrapping around Ben like constrictive tendrils. The celestial sapiens are responding to the disruption you've created. Below them, Kevin had recovered and was now channeling his remaining energy into a desperate attack on the tower's base. Each blast was absorbed, but the effort forced the tower's systems to divert resources from elsewhere, including, hopefully, from countering Albedo's efforts. Gwen. Max's voice came through the earpiece again. We've got problems. Albedo says the recalibration is working, but it's triggering a cascade failure in the tower's containment systems. The energy building up, it's going critical. Ben's eyes widened with what appeared to be genuine alarm. They're overloading the quantum stabilizers. If those fail. For the first time, the composed certainty in his voice wavered. Everyone within 50 miles will be instantly vaporized. The secondary effects will devastate the hemisphere. You're lying, Gwen accused, though doubt crept into her tone. Trying to make us stop. I have no reason to lie, Ben replied, suddenly ceasing his resistance to her restraints. Not when the truth is far more persuasive. Check for yourself, feel the energy patterns shifting. Gwen extended her anodite senses toward the tower and immediately recoiled. The energy building within was becoming chaotic, unstable, the carefully designed patterns dissolving into something far more dangerous. "Grandpa," she called urgently through the comm, "is he right? Is the tower going critical?" "Albedo confirms it," Max replied grimly. "The recalibration is working, the signal is being redirected to target Ben specifically, but it's destabilizing the entire structure. We've got maybe 10 minutes before catastrophic failure." Kevin had overheard through his own comm link. "Can you stop it? Reverse what you've done." "Negative," came Albedo's voice, unusually tense. "The process has achieved self-sustainment. I can complete the recalibration or abandon it, but I cannot prevent the overload. The best I can do is extend the timeline by perhaps 5 minutes." A terrible silence fell as the implications sank in. They had come to stop Ben, to prevent the tower from transforming humanity, and instead, they might have doomed millions to instant death, with countless more to follow from the secondary effects. "Let me go," Ben said quietly to Gwen, no longer struggling against her restraints. "I can stabilize the tower, prevent the catastrophe. It's what I was designed to do, solve problems beyond human capacity." Gwen's luminous eyes studied him, searching for deception and finding none. "And the recalibration? The signal targeting you?" "Will likely succeed," Ben admitted. "The composite consciousness will be separated, returning me to whatever I was before. But that doesn't matter now. What matters is preventing millions of deaths." It was the most human thing he'd said since his transformation, prioritizing lives over his own continuation. For the first time in months, Gwen saw a genuine glimpse of her cousin beneath the composite intelligence. "Kevin," she called down, seeking his input. "I don't trust him," Kevin replied immediately. "But I don't see another option. If Albedo says the overload can't be stopped." "It can't," Albedo's voice confirmed through the comm, "not by your primitive understanding of the technology." Gwen made her decision. The mana restraints around Ben dissolved, freeing him to act. "Save them," she said simply. "Prove you're still Ben Tennyson somewhere inside that composite consciousness." Ben nodded once, then turned toward the tower. The Omnitrix symbol on his chest pulsed with intense green light as he established a direct connection to the structure's systems. His expression became distant, focused inward on processes none of them could perceive. "The quantum stabilizers are critically damaged," he reported after a moment, his voice taking on that mechanical quality again. "Redirecting power from auxiliary systems. Implementing emergency containment protocols." His hands moved in complex patterns, manipulating energy fields invisible to normal human perception. Through her anodite senses, Gwen could see what he was doing, reaching into the tower's systems at a fundamental level, reorganizing energy patterns, creating new pathways for the building power to flow safely. It was like watching someone conduct an impossibly complex orchestra, bringing harmony to chaos through sheer will. "It's working," she reported to Kevin and the others. "He's stabilizing the reactions. But the recalibration is still proceeding," Albedo confirmed through the comm, 97% complete. "Whatever he's doing to stabilize the tower, it isn't stopping the signal reconfiguration." Ben must have heard this through his connection to the tower's systems. He turned to look at Gwen, an unreadable expression on his face. "A dilemma," he observed with unnerving calm. "I can stabilize the tower or I can preserve the composite consciousness. Not both." "Interesting." "Ben," Gwen said urgently, "people's lives are at stake. Millions of them." "I'm aware," he replied, returning his attention to the energy flows. "The statistical analysis is quite clear. The choice is obvious." Above them, the unnatural coloration in the sky intensified. Reality itself seemed to waver, like heat distortion but affecting everything at once. The celestial sapiens were closing in, their consensus reached, their judgment imminent. "Ben." Max's voice came through the comm, directly addressing his grandson for the first time. Whatever you're going to do, do it now. We're running out of time on multiple fronts. The tower's energy pulses had become erratic, some surging with blinding intensity while others faltered completely. The entire structure groaned under stresses it was never designed to withstand. Ben closed his eyes, his connection to the tower reaching its peak. The green circuitry patterns on his armor glowed brighter than ever before, and for a moment, he seemed to exist in multiple places simultaneously, afterimages of himself performing different actions, timeline possibilities made briefly visible. Recalibration complete, Albedo announced through the comm, signal redirected. Target, Benjamin Tennyson. The tower pulsed one final time, a wave of energy unlike any before it erupting from its peak. Instead of dispersing outward as intended, the energy coalesced into a focused beam that struck Ben directly. He made no sound as the energy engulfed him, though his expression shifted from concentration to something like surprise. The green circuitry patterns on his armor began to fragment, breaking apart into constituent elements that orbited his form like satellites around a planet. What's happening to him? Kevin asked, shielding his eyes from the increasing brightness. The recalibration, Gwen explained, her anodite senses allowing her to perceive the process. The composite consciousness is separating into its component parts. Indeed, 3 distinct energy signatures were becoming visible within the maelstrom surrounding Ben. The familiar green of the Omnitrix, the temporal gold of the Chronarch influence, and something else, a warm, human presence. That had been subsumed beneath the others. Ben opened his eyes, which now flickered between their unnatural green glow and his natural human color. The stabilization is incomplete, he announced, his voice shifting between harmonics and normal human tones. Critical failure in 60 seconds. Get out of there. Max ordered through the comm, everyone evacuate now. Negative, Ben replied, the human quality in his voice growing stronger. Someone has to complete the stabilization sequence manually. The automated systems are beyond repair. Gwen flew closer, fighting against the energy storm surrounding her cousin. Ben, no. Come with us. We'll find another way. He turned to her, and for a moment, she saw her cousin clearly, not the composite consciousness, not the evolved being, but Ben Tennyson, looking at her with the same expression he'd worn when they were kids getting into trouble together. No other way, dweeb, he said, using the childhood nickname with a small smile. Some problems can only be solved from the inside. Ben, please, she pleaded, reaching toward him only to be repelled by the energy field. Tell Grandpa. Ben started, then shook his head. He knows. He's always known. His gaze shifted to Kevin. Take care of her, Levin. Don't let her lose herself to the anodite stuff. Before either could respond, Ben turned back to the tower, his connection intensifying. You should run now, he advised calmly. I can contain the explosion, but only within a limited radius. Approximately 1 mile should be safe distance. We're not leaving you. Gwen insisted. You already did, Ben replied, not unkindly. Months ago, when I chose this path. Now I'm choosing a different one. The human quality in his voice strengthened further. It's hero time. One last time. With those words, he fully embraced the tower's systems, his consciousness seeming to expand into the structure itself. The separate energy signatures, Omnitrix, Chronarch, human, began to merge again, but differently this time. Not a composite being pursuing its own agenda, but a unified consciousness with a single purpose, containment. Gwen, we have to go, Kevin urged, taking her arm. He's made his choice. Honor it. With agonizing reluctance, Gwen allowed Kevin to pull her away. They retreated at maximum speed, Kevin absorbing energy from the environment to enhance his movement while Gwen flew beside him. Grandpa, Rook, Albedo, status, she called through the comm. Exiting the tower now, Max replied, his voice tight with emotion. Paradox's temporal displacement is getting us through security. ETA to minimum safe distance, 3 minutes. The tower's going to blow before that, Kevin warned, checking the scanner on his wrist. Energy readings are off the charts. Gwen looked back over her shoulder. The tower now glowed with an intensity that hurt to look at directly, energy patterns shifting erratically across its surface. At its center, barely visible through the chaos, was a human figure, arms outstretched, head thrown back, becoming one with the forces he was struggling to contain. Faster, she urged, channeling more of her anodite power into speed. They had almost reached the minimum safe distance when the world behind them exploded into light. Not the devastating hemisphere-wide catastrophe that had been predicted, but something more controlled, a perfect sphere of energy that expanded to exactly 1 mile radius, then stopped as if hitting an invisible barrier. Within that sphere, the tower collapsed in on itself, matter converting to energy and energy folding inward to a single point. The implosion created a vacuum that pulled at them even from this distance, drawing dust and debris toward the collapsing structure. Then, with a final pulse that they felt rather than saw, everything stopped. Where the tower had stood was nothing. Not ruins, not a crater, but a perfect absence, a sphere of emptiness that defied the natural laws of physics. Gwen stared at the void, her anodite senses reaching out instinctively, searching for any trace of her cousin. "Ben," she whispered, though she knew there would be no answer. Max, Rook, and Albedo reached them moments later, their temporal displacement device flickering out as its power source failed. They too stared at the perfect emptiness where the tower had been. "He did it," Max said quietly, his weathered face lined with grief and pride. "He contained the explosion. Saved everyone." "But the recalibration," Kevin began, turning to Albedo. "You said it worked. That it separated the composite consciousness." "It did," Albedo confirmed, his usual arrogance subdued. For approximately 38 seconds, Benjamin Tennyson was himself again, his true self, freed from the Omnitrix and Chronic influences. "And he chose to save everyone," Gwen finished, the purple energy surrounding her beginning to fade as she struggled to maintain the anodite transformation through her grief. Even knowing it meant. She couldn't complete the sentence. Didn't need to. They all understood the sacrifice Ben had made, choosing humanity over power, over continued existence, over everything the composite consciousness had valued. Above them, the unnatural coloration in the sky gradually returned to normal. The fabric of reality, which had seemed so fragile moments before, stabilized. "The celestial sapiens," Rook observed. "They've withdrawn their judgment." Ben's actions changed their consensus, came Paradox's voice from behind them. The time traveler approached slowly, leaning heavily on a cane, his aged features drawn with exhaustion. By sacrificing himself to contain the tower's energy, he demonstrated that humanity retains the capacity for selflessness, for choosing the greater good over personal power. "He's really gone?" Gwen asked, though she already knew the answer. "There's no way he could have survived." Paradox's expression softened with compassion. "Benjamin Tennyson as you knew him ceased to exist the moment the Nexus Protocol completed its integration months ago. What sacrificed itself today was something both more and less than human, a being that, in its final moments, remembered what it meant to be a hero." "So what now?" Kevin asked the question they were all thinking. "The DN aliens, Ben's facilities, all the changes he made, what happens to them?" "Some will unravel without his consciousness maintaining them," Paradox explained. "Others will require more, direct intervention. The work of rebuilding, of healing, has only just begun." Gwen looked down at her hands, still glowing faintly with anodite energy. "And us? What happens to us now?" The question hung in the air, unanswerable in its simplicity. They had spent months fighting Ben, defining themselves in opposition to what he had become. Without that struggle, who were they? What purpose would drive them forward? "We remember him," Max said finally, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes. "Not what he became at the end, but who he was for all the years before." The hero who saved the universe more times than anyone could count. The grandson who made me prouder than I could ever express. He looked at the perfect void where the tower had been. The boy who, when it mattered most, made the right choice. Gwen felt the Anodite energy receding, her human form reasserting itself as emotions overwhelmed the alien consciousness. Grief, loss, pride, love, too complex, too human for the Anodite perspective to fully embrace. Kevin's energy absorption likewise faded, leaving him exhausted but himself again. He put an arm around Gwen's shoulders, supporting her as they stood together in the face of an uncertain future. "We rebuild," Rook suggested quietly. "The plumbers, Earth's defenses, the connections between worlds that Ben once protected. We continue his legacy, the true legacy, not what the composite consciousness distorted it into." Paradox nodded approvingly. The timeline stabilizes. Reality continues. Different, changed by what has happened, but continuing nonetheless. He looked at each of them in turn. "This is not an ending, but a transition. Remember that in the days to come." As if to emphasize his point, a flicker of green light appeared briefly at the edge of the void, there and gone so quickly they might have imagined it. But Gwen's Anodite senses, still partially active, detected something more, a ripple in reality, a possibility not quite extinguished. "Did you see?" she began, but Paradox silenced her with a gentle gesture. "Time is not a straight line," he reminded her cryptically. "And heroes have a way of returning when they're needed most." He tapped his cane against the ground, creating a small temporal distortion. "But that's a story for another day." Before any of them could question him further, he vanished in a flash of blue light, leaving them alone with their grief, their questions, and the first faint stirrings of hope. Together, they turned away from the void, facing the world that Ben had tried to change, the world they now needed to heal. The sun was setting, painting the landscape in shades of amber and gold, reminding them that even after the darkest days, light returns. "Let's go home," Max said simply. As they walked away, none of them noticed the tiny green spark that appeared again at the void's edge, pulsing once, twice, then vanishing into possibility, waiting for the right moment to return. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.